Star Trek will not be presented tonight, so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. Coming to Kickstarter from the mind of Franco, the man behind Teen Titans Go to the Library, Faye and the Moon, and All Yeah Comics, comes the new LXT, the adversarial fighting card game, live now on Kickstarter. LXT, Lux vs. Tenebris. Imagine a loved one has been spirited away to a land of terror and torture. Would you be willing to go after them and fight through a horde of acolytes of the Dark One just to get them back? Developed as a role-playing card game that can be played multiple ways. The cards will have full-color illustrations on the front and chock full of stamps and moves on the back. You can also get the LXT Who's Who book with origin stories and information about all the characters. Still want more? Also available is the LXT Dark Atlas book, filled with prose stories about all the baddies and illustrations from a wide selection of comic artists. There are plenty of add-ons you can purchase separately, like comic books, stickers, original art from the game, and more. It's going to be a howling good time. LXT, live, now on Kickstarter. Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, and I stay up for only a very, very few people on the West Coast, but happy to welcome the Viceroy of Verisimilitude and the head man for the Imagination Connoisseurs, Meyer Burnett. Robert, good to see you, buddy.
John, I was saying to you that we've been doing this for almost a decade now. But you predate me being on YouTube, I think, or when I just started with Schnapp.
In a spotty way, because I really didn't start doing. Well, I started doing it, I guess, during COVID, and you did it. You started doing it actually prior to that.
Well, I mean, in terms of being on your podcast, even before you were on YouTube.
Well, that's right. That is true.
We've been talking for a long time, so it's good to see you again. Well, good to be here.
No, I'm thrilled to have you, man. And again, you're almost daily vidcasts on YouTube on the Robservation and the Burn Network. Everybody,
the Burn Network, yeah.
And if you don't already, although I imagine a lot of your minions are here watching us because we share a good portion of our audience and everything, so that's great. But yeah, man, no, you're always entertaining. I want to hear your point of view. I am a student to your chess master as far as Star Trek knowledge and work experience with Paramount and with the franchise. Truly, man. No, and I've enjoyed your work, not only Free Enterprise, but your wonderful work on the videos back at the Vegas Hilton for the Star Trek experience.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Wow, it takes me back. That job actually led to us making Free Enterprise, which is kind of
that's
funny.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah.
Hayden says hello. Man,
hello,
Hayden. It means a lot, everybody, that you're joining us tonight, because certainly we are going to talk about at least the first two episodes of Discovery. I know Rob's seen at least the first 5, I think.
We have to. I mean, it is the new Star Trek that's airing. The new Star Trek. Oh, wait. No, I don't want to be negative.
Oh, shut up. Nah, you can be negative on my show. Honestly, Rob, you come from this, as do I. We want good Star Trek. That's all. And I'm sure you're the same way. We're like, all right, well, maybe I'll like this episode more. And maybe we'll finally listen and give us what we truly want.
I mean, I think, look, I've been watching Star Trek my whole life. And there has been good Star Trek and bad Star Trek in every series and movie and, all that. And sorry, it is not my birthday, but this running joke is the greatest thing ever. I love my viewers. Thank you all for that. I think that what would be the ultimate thing about this joke is if on my actual birthday, which is next month, May 15th, that nobody will wish me happy birthday, and it'll be a total disaster. But no, I think what's really interesting is there's this idea that that there's toxic fandom. Everyone's talking about fans being toxic, and all anybody wants is great stuff. They want great programming, and all of these franchises that have been around started out great. That's why they're franchises. They've endured because they were amazing. And what's happened is the corporate controlled media, they treat an IP or a franchise the way they would any product. Now, like Coca-Cola, people know what Coca-Cola is. They're just going to buy Coca-Cola because they know what it is. Star Trek is not a product. It's not Coca-Cola. And if you don't know how to make old formula Coke, if you don't know what the ingredients were that made it special, that made people like it for 58 years, you can't just slap a Star Trek label on something and have it be successful. You have to understand the ingredients, the essence. What made Star Trek, or what made Star Wars, or Doctor Who, or the MCU? Take your pick. If you don't understand the very essence of the IP, and why would a corporation understand that? There's no way a corporation could understand that because it doesn't fit. Art and commerce. Hollywood was all about that frisson between art and commerce. Now all there is commerce. They don't understand art. People don't. The people that run things, they're not readers. They don't know literature. They don't know.
Read a balance sheet, and there's not a column for is the product entertaining?
Right, and
or as you say, they don't know DNA.
It's a good story or bad story. They just look at Star Trek and they look at, okay, in the 58 years it's existed, here's how much money it made. But like with real estate, you can go, okay, in this neighborhood, at this much square footage, if you build a 10-story building and the first 2 stories are mixed use, you got retail space, you can say, okay, with this much square footage and these big box retailers or whoever, and then the next 8 floors are living, you can rent condos, whatever they are, how much money you're going to make, and it's easy, you can quantify it. But you can't do that with art. You can't do that with storytelling, because how do you explain to somebody who's never read a science fiction novel what good science fiction is? Well, I was hired to make this. Yeah, but you don't know it's not. Well, isn't any TV show the same? Don't we make? No, it's not. And we live in that world now. And I think less people, because classical education is less now let's we have to make sure that the kids, we don't want to bother. We have to make sure that they don't have to read things that are a little beyond them. And it's like, no, we used to require people to step up to the plate. You need to be better. And now we're catering to the lowest common denominator, which I don't understand at all.
But you've made the observation, and I agree with you.
No. The Robservation.
The Robservation, if I may. You're 100% right. No, man, it's all good. I love this. By the way, real fast, Mike Coonrad. What's up, John and Rob? Celebrating the start of Disco's final season, sort of.
Woo-hoo!
And Hayden wants us to know he's got 255 subs, man. Channel keeps growing, and it's
congratulations.
His plan is after college, he wants to move to California and grow his channel, eventually become a full-time critic. Very nice. Which way is David Ellison, the next CEO of Paramount? Which is why David Ellison, has announced Robert Burnett will take over Star Trek projects going forward.
It's April 4th. It's not April 1st anymore.
I understand, but. No, what I was going to say is, and you've made the observation that the audience, today's audience, wants to see themselves, and I disagree with that. But because, like you, I started watching Star Trek. My earliest memory, I don't remember plot, but I do know that last season in '69, when I was 4, my parents were watching, And
Yeah.
I know it was on TV. And I remember, like you, the first wave of syndication in the 70s.
Mm.
And it was on in Chicago, and I'd watch it every Sunday morning. And ultimately, they started running it 5 nights a week. And I was hooked. And I mean, and also, like you said, a lot of the stuff went over our heads. But
Sure.
we appreciate it. We know we were watching the best of the best. The Apollo missions were winding down. And we could extrapolate and go, 300 years in the future, sure, why not? It could, it could be the Enterprise and us in space the way they're in deep space.
Yeah, I mean, well, what people forget is Star Trek was born out of that Camelot spirit of the Kennedy White House. We're going to go to the moon and do the other things, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And, Kennedy was one of the great orators. Of the speeches he made were incredibly rousing and very erudite. And they always spoke to that can-do, coming off of PT 109, coming out of the World War II generation, the greatest generation, the building of the middle class in the 1950s. And then what Star Trek represented, I mean, we were in the middle. We'd seen Mercury, we'd seen Gemini. We were in the middle of the Apollo program. And literally the third season of Star Trek ended and we landed on the moon.
Yep.
And that was a very heady time. So even though you were in the middle of the civil rights movement and Vietnam and American culture was in a very tumultuous state, culture was changing rapidly. Star Trek represented this beacon of a future that was really an American future, which is why Star Trek has never really traveled very far foreign, but it represented that American, that idea that we're going to be here in 300 years and things are going to be great and there is going to be equality. I mean, Star Trek believe what I believe. There is one race of human beings on this planet. One. That's it. And our whatever exterior differences we have between us just means that we are from a stock that grew up in various geopolitical situations in the world. Like you're from here, you're from here, you're from here, but our DNA is the same. If you can procreate, you're one race. It's not like you figure out how did the Cylons and humans procreate in the new Battlestar Galactica? I don't know. But on this planet, there's one human race. And that's what Star Trek told us.
Well, Roddenberry, Gene Kuhn and company, they all pushed us in the right direction. Yeah. Berman comes in, really believes in the Roddenberry ethic and says, no, we're going to keep doing it Gene's way in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And maybe to the detriment in some ways because of that. Well, there's no conflict within the humans in the future. Thank God they make DS9. And now there's alien races to have conflict and everything. And it's great. And my God, I mean, DS9 just gets better and better with age. And you really appreciate the writing. And of course, I love Next Generation. And I know you and Mark Allman and the Inglorious Treksperts sometimes, you guys had your issues with Voyager, and I totally understand because, the network again was, hey, we want more Next Gen. And it's like, well, we already did that for 7 years. So
though,
Enterprise even worse. Go ahead, please.
Reassessing Voyager, though, Voyager is very schizophrenic, but when Voyager was good, it was great.
Totally agree.
And I think that, it's people like John Ottman, the editor and composer and director, John Ottman, who I met working on movies like Superman Returns and Usual Suspects, and him and Brian Fuller, who is one of the co-creators of Discovery. It was the two of them, and Fuller worked on Voyager, on Voyager, who told me, like, you need to go back and look, and they gave me certain episodes to look at again. And because I was kind of checked out when Voyager was first airing, and they're right. Voyager was, I think they made missteps like leaning into the Borg as heavily as they did and humanizing the Borg and all that. I think they went in the wrong direction. But yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Voyager was the most popular Star Trek streaming series for a while, because people were rediscovering it.
Yeah. And I also think there's that nostalgia cycle. And right now, much as, I remember, the 80s was the big craze for a while, then the 90s. I mean, certainly coming from radio, I saw those trends. And so now it is, the 90s are still kind of the new, I remember when. And I think that also contributes to Voyager's success. But also, I've always said a third of Voyager was not good, a third of it was okay, and a third of it was exceptional. And you're
Yeah.
right, that great episode where they go to the planet that time moves faster.
Oh,
On the
blink of an
planet.
eye.
Blink of an eye. Fantastic.
That is a great. Not only is that a great episode of Star Trek, it's a great episode of science fiction. You know, because you're dealing with time dilation and really interesting stuff. So,
something that, as we both agree, Star Trek Discovery, science fiction eludes them.
Well, you know, if somebody pointed out, my friend Dan Coyle pointed out that if you look at the recap, you know, last year or last season on Voyager, they concentrate on the interpersonal romantic relationships of the characters.
Yep.
You know, like Saru's hooking up with his Vulcan hottie, you know, and Book is broken up with Michael Burnham. And here's and I'm not the only person with this theory. I believe that many of the TV creators now that are working on genre television, they all came of age watching Buffy and Angel. They're all completely in it. And to be fair, Buffy and Angel were great shows.
Sure they were.
And the interpersonal relationships and the fact that they were some of the first to embrace same-sex relationships amongst principal characters. And they had diversity down way before everybody, before 2012, 2013, where our entire civilization was derailed by social media. They were already doing those things, and it felt natural. It didn't feel forced, like, oh, we're gonna shoehorn all this stuff. It was done very naturalistically. There's a great way, there's a great scene where Willow kind of comes out to Buffy. Beautifully written scene, really well done. Way better than anything you'd see today, which is the most heavy-handed, beat you over the head, and everybody, like, you know, John, it used to be Star Trek expected you to come up to its level. You needed to step up. It was presenting you with concepts and ideas that made you a better person. Now it's the reverse. Now it's like Star Trek is no longer about the best of the best. It's about all of us. All of us we all get to be on a starship and travel around the universe. And like, I don't believe any of those people would survive an episode, much less multiple seasons of episodes.
I hear you, Wesley. And I respect this, Wesley. Wesley says, I don't need to see myself, but I do love seeing a lot of different types of people.
Yeah.
I can't pretend it's not awesome when I do see characters I relate to. Now, I'll say, and I want to hear Rob's thoughts as well, I absolutely agree with that. However, you can do it in a much more subtle fashion. I go back to when Adira and Gray were introduced on Discovery, and Rob has talked about this scene as well, where Stamets gives the wrong pronoun to Adira, and she says, and I forget if she identifies as they. I think she does identify.
She does. They have a whole conversation.
They identify as they. Pardon me. And there's that pregnant pause on Stamets' vision. Okay. But again, as you just pointed out, Saru, and I'm sorry, everybody, there's going to be spoilers if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes of Discovery, but Saru and the woman from Navarre, half Vulcan, half Romulan, however it works, they've announced that they're probably going to get married. Well, that's fine. So in this era of the 3100s, and also ever since Star Trek began, we've had interspecies relationships.
I mean, if you're 1,000 years from now and we're still talking about pronouns, the human race is doomed.
100%,
because we've evolved, we've gone nowhere.
Yes.
And
not in a negative way to not address it, but why don't you just make it matter of fact?
Well, and also with surgical techniques. I mean, let's say, like, I'm of the opinion that say if you're trans, I really do believe, because there's now evidence to suggest that gender dysmorphia is a real thing. Like, people's brains are literally, you could literally have a woman's brain, the brain chemistry of a female in a male body.
Sure.
And I've always believed that. I've always believed it's a naturally occurring thing. Well, in the 32nd century, with the surgical techniques, they would identify this at birth. You do a brain scan and go, this person was, it would be in utero. They would already know. Our technology would be so far advanced that they would handle this instantaneously. So there would be nobody who has gender dysmorphia, because it would be fixed by the surgical techniques and the scientific advancements 1,000 years from now.
But even, let's say, gender fluid people, fine. I mean, again, by all means, show somebody
we're marrying different
We're cool with it.
species. That's not even
Right.
gender fluid. That's species fluid.
I'm hip.
That's so far away from what we're talking about now. It's so far evolved. And Star Trek already went there.
Right.
Our main character of Spock was half Vulcan and half human. If you're not looking at that going, well, that's pretty progressive. I mean,
Right,
that flew in the face. If you think about the 60s, we couldn't even allow intermarriages in parts of this country. And you have a human woman marrying an alien.
There were stations in the South that were really pissed when Kirk kissed Uhura.
Oh my God. And that was in the 3rd season.
Right. And I mean, hell, man, even before that, Dick Van Dyke, when they did the joke about Rob thinking they had the wrong baby, and it turns out it's a black couple, Greg Morris, and I forget the actress that played the couple. And I heard Reiner say that, the network was scared that the South wasn't going to show those episodes. No, we understand, but we're past that. And that's the thing. So by all means, it's cool to have Adira and Gray in a relationship, but Gray, I mean, I'm really interested because I know eventually Gray will be back on the show. What are they going to show us? Because I never understood what Gray's function was on the ship other than being Adira's significant other. And it's like, well, I mean,
also he was they were a ghost or whatever and came back. I mean, it was so anti-science and anti-science fiction. That's the thing that I really object to is that at least even when you had magic technology, like a transporter, which was a production issue. They didn't want to have to launch a shuttlecraft and show a miniature shot. So they found an elegant solution and created this tech. But the thing is, the reason we believed it is because the tech had limitations. Line of sight beaming, you have to be in orbit. You have to reach a position because the beam could only go from the ship to the planet. And if there was an ion storm like we saw in Enemy Within when Kirk was split into 2, the transporter wouldn't work. And Sulu's out stranded on the planet going, hey, can you lower some coffee down for me on a rope or something? And it became you believe in the fantasy because I've often said that the best fiction is truthful. The best fiction, you have to have a lot of truth in your fiction to make the fiction believable. And there's no believability in Star Trek Discovery at all. They don't understand the internal design of their own starships. They don't understand these characters. They're telling us that human beings 1,000 years from now are going to correct. You have a non-binary person correcting a gay man over pronouns. Really?
Well, and also
how Portland.
Man, there are a lot of scenes where all the black characters are together, all the gay and trans characters are only together.
It's so weird.
It would be really nice to see everybody kind of interact.
No, the segregation in Star Trek Discovery. One day when the show's gone away, people are going to start writing about how the subtlety of the segregation in this show is abhorrent, and it's the most anti-Star Trek. Because the thing is, there is a level in activist circles that are segregationist. They're as bad as the South was during Jim Crow. They want to have their spaces. We don't want these people here. I mean, it's so weird how we've gone from a Star Trek future where everybody makes the whole stronger, and yet individuality and individual achievement was celebrated. And nowadays that's not the case. We have all these little young Marxists running around going, yeah, because you guys you apparently didn't go to school and learn about the 20th century. But what are you going to do?
Mike, I agree with Mike. Pretty much all of modern Trek is more science fantasy than science fiction. I wonder in the 5 episodes, and I don't want you to spoil per se, but are we seeing the nacelles split off from the ship like we did whenever they made it to the 31st century?
Yeah, I mean, look, what we saw in the first episode of Discovery that's already aired with 2 starships smashing, literally crashing nose down into the ground. I mean, I'm out.
Well, again, where's the realism? Because as you say, the ships in space should move like battleships, not like fighter jets.
No, they're and that's another thing. I mean, it's very funny to me that if you look at something like Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, when the Enterprise and the Reliant are fighting, they might as well be close-quartered 17th century, triple-masted sailing vessels that are shooting cannons at one another. And they move, the way that starships move is to convey their size. It's all made up anyway, but what they're doing is they're using our understanding of seafaring vessels, putting them in space, and they're using that. I mean, look, if space combat was real, nobody would see anybody else. The ships are thousands of kilometers apart. They would, they're firing weapons that travel at light speed. They would never see one another, but that's not dramatically interesting. So when you put these ships in close quarters, you have to give us something that we can understand from our world today, because that kind of combat with those kinds of weapons, you wouldn't see anything. So how do they do it? They do it the way they do it. So,
well, as Wayne points out, that first episode, Burnham standing on a hull during warp makes no sense. No, it doesn't. It's ridiculous.
Well, the funny thing is the people that are making this show, they don't stop to go, okay, well, how does warp work? If you have engines, if you have warp nacelles that are creating a warp bubble around a ship so it can warp space and travel, it's not like you're going fast. It's not like, it's the Road Warrior where you're on a semi and you can crawl up on the top of the semi and no. And so when you watch this stuff, you're like, their thinking is so earthbound, and it's so just uncreative and frankly dumb. It's really dumb.
Rob, I think you give them credit. Oh, I'm sorry. Finish your thought.
No, that's it.
I was going to say, I think you give them credit saying that they watched Buffy and Angel. I think they just grew up on teen romance, period. And everything is teen romance. And as you do, I dread Starfleet Academy because that's going to be even worse. And, again, we love the First Duty, Fantastic Next Gen episode. I love the Deep Space Nine one where they're with Red Squad.
Right.
Or Jake and Nod. And it's like, no, you can do good cadet stories. Lower Deck, the original Next Gen Lower Deck story, which is about young officers. But, fine. Okay. So you can do it. But again, good Lord, the whole Saru and the woman from Navarre, do you think she likes me? I don't know if she likes me. It's like, what the fuck am I watching? This isn't Degrassi Star Trek.
But that's all they know. That's all they know.
Yep.
And they haven't read, recently Vernor Vinge died. Vernor Vinge was one of our great grandmasters of modern science fiction. He wrote a novel called A Fire Upon the Deep that I recommend everybody read. That book alone, if that's all they read, there was enough ideas in that one science fiction novel that could have powered seasons of modern Trek. Because remember, a season of Trek is only 10 episodes, or 15 they got out of Discovery, 13, but now this season's 10. There were 26 episodes of the Berman era Trek shows. 26. And I don't know. I mean, I don't like to hate on things, but in the long run, dumb Star Trek is bad for our civilization because it's not asking our audience is being pandered to by lowest common denominator material, whereas Star Trek used to be the exact opposite. At a time when America was tearing itself apart, Star Trek offered optimism and it offered intelligence, and it offered a future where you had to be good at what you did. And it expected humanity to be up here, not mediocre. Yeah. Star Trek Discovery is a show about mediocre people who are either miraculously helicopter parented people that are just perfect, or people that are just, they're okay.
There was an early review of this season, and they compared the crew of Discovery to an office atmosphere of cubicles. And it's like, these are your coworkers who demand you look at their photos of their grandchildren, and let's make sure we all get together and sing happy birthday, for whoever, as opposed to the people that need to get your ass out of that foxhole while enemy fire is overhead. And it's so true, man. And I also know, and it drives me nuts, that now they question, well, is Starfleet a military, system or not? And it's like, Well, no, they're explorers. Yes, but they're military explorers, and there's a chain of command. And my God, any other Starfleet captain that we've ever seen has been, one of, if you speak out against the captain, hey, why don't you go to your quarters? Or even better, why don't we put you in the brig? And that's why Michael Burnham from day one has been this annoying character. And I'm sorry, I know every one of these actors are decent and good,
Delightful people.
and it's not their fault. They're given shit to
No.
read, and she's a classic example, and it bums me out because, and also she's Spock's sister, and it's like, fuck you. I'm sorry, it still sticks in my craw. It's like
what they've done to Spock on Strange New Worlds is a crime.
Yeah.
And this idea that, well, the Spock we know wasn't fully formed. No. He was. He had to be better than any Vulcan because he was decried by Vulcan society. And, he was the first person to leave to join Starfleet, the first Vulcan to join Starfleet, or maybe, okay, that might not be necessarily canonical, but he had to be better than any Vulcan. And the way they saddle, what do? They saddle him with a relationship with Nurse Chapel. Spock would never have a relationship on his ship. I mean, and what they did with him and T'Pring and all that, they just turn these characters into generic TV characters. They're all involved because they don't know how to write science fiction. So all they write is relationship drama stuff from any generic. I mean, when you're watching, I've been watching with Elizabeth, I've been watching The Resident, which is a network, another medical drama. Half the show, like with any medical drama, it's formulaic. You see people come in every week and they have medical problems. Sure. And then you have the soap opera, who's involved with who and what's going on. That is just a generic TV trope.
Right.
And Star Trek didn't used to have that. Star Trek was an anthology show, that had the recurring characters. And,
right.
and now it's not. Now they focus. They're more interested in who's hooking up with who's shipping who, and it's utterly ridiculous because these characters would not be involved with each other. At least we wouldn't be seeing it because we only have an hour an episode. So to spend any time on their interpersonal relationships is bizarre to me.
The episode, it was second season of Strange New Worlds, when the ethereal beings, I forget what the problem was with them, but when Chapel was with Uhura, and I forget, and maybe the helmsman, and they were on that planet, and they reconfigured Spock into a human.
Yeah.
And she's trying to plead the case of why, they need to make him the way he was. And she has to profess her love. And she makes the two other crew members turn around while she's talking to these ethereal things. And it's like, come on, man. Again, this is not Degrassi. What the hell are you doing? Why are you wasting our time with this crap? And you're absolutely right. They made Spock a freshman at high school. And it's like, he was at the academy in San Francisco, likely interacting with humans. I don't know how to break it to you people.
I know it's so ridiculous. I mean, but it's funny if you look at so you have the Twilight Zone that aired from 59 to 64, and Rod Serling, like Gene Roddenberry and like Joseph Stefano and Leslie Stevens on Outer Limits, there were subjects you couldn't do on TV because of network standards and practices. They wouldn't let you do it. But if it's from the Twilight Zone or it's in the 23rd century, you could allegorically tell your story about Vietnam, or an anti-war story, or deal with religion, or deal with racism, or deal with any number of things because it's in the Twilight Zone. So it's not our world. And that's and then of course the people that wrote those were some of the great fantasists of the time. As a matter of fact, whether it was Richard Matheson or Charles Beaumont, I mean, Matheson wrote on Twilight Zone and Star Trek, and Matheson wrote for Shatner on Twilight Zone and Shatner on Star Trek, and you had these writers who, by the way, were people of letters. They not only did they come out of the Greatest Generation and live through a war, but they also were playwrights and novelists and short story writers,
and they were well read, and they didn't have television, so all they had were movies and radio, as far as entertainment. And you're right, man. You're 100% right.
And nowadays the only people they know TV shows. They know Joss Whedon, they know Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they know Firefly, they know Angel, maybe a little Dollhouse. And their entire everything they write, it doesn't matter whether it's a medical show, whether it's a science fiction show, whether it's a horror show, it's all the same. It's all this generic interpersonal relationship BS. I mean, you're never going to get an episode like the Doomsday Machine. And then modern Star Trek is constantly dipping in. They're saying that, well, we're going to go into the 32nd century so we can leave Star Trek canon behind. And what is this 5th season of Discovery about? A 6-season TNG episode. The whole thing is a sequel to The Chase.
The Chase, yep.
And like, what? Are you being clever?
And again, Rob, you've seen 5 episodes. I've only seen 2. And like many other Discovery seasons, you might start with, all right, well, I don't know where they're going, but at least it's an intriguing opening. But it's that J.J. Abrams mystery box. And this season, my buddy Wayne, who does my Star Trek review show, he'll be on Monday. We were talking today, and he's like, so basically they're doing National Treasure as Star Trek this year.
Yeah.
Listen, man. What's the great Romulan first season Trek episode that you love?
Balance of Terror.
Balance of Terror. Balance of Terror is Run Silent.
Yeah, it is.
The enemy below. Any classic submarine thing. And in fact, Rob, I don't know if you heard it, but one of the Satellite Trexpert shows, the one that Lisa Klink does, they'll review an episode. Man, this week's episode is fantastic. And they got the guy who co-wrote Future Imperfect.
Okay.
The Riker episode, everybody, where Riker wakes up, it's 15 years later. He's the guy, and he's like, I don't know what the hell's going on. It's a fantastic episode, very strong. And he, to his credit, admitted, because he had years of 70s dramatic writing as well as Star Trek and other 80s shows. And he's like, listen, we stole from everything.
Yeah, of course.
The gun on Ice Planet Zero.
From Galactica, the 2-parter.
And that's what Kelly Dirty Dozen essentially.
Yeah. Or Guns of Navarone.
Guns of Navarone, absolutely. And it's like, look, that's fine, but you got to be clever with your adaptation. And so, when last season of Discovery started, and it was 2 seasons ago. No, yeah, it was 2 seasons when the dilithium was inert. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, that was, I understand you're looking at the fuel crisis. Somebody was like, it's Mad Max.
Well, yeah, it's an interesting idea, but
it was first of all, it was completely implausible. It was so stupid. And not every species in the Star Trek universe uses dilithium for faster than light travel. The Romulans, especially in the era of Next Generation, have controlled singularities. They have artificial singularities powering their warp drive. So the idea that I understand you want to have a fuel crisis, but then you have this character that is like his DNA is tied to dilithium, and him screaming out blew up. It was so stupid.
Kid is crying, and that's why all the dilithium went inert.
And it's like you're going. Have you ever read a second grade biology book? Have you ever studied science at all? And they come up with these ideas, and I wonder, like, who thought of that? And another thing that's really frustrating is I'm a huge fan of, I don't think it's going to come as any surprise to anyone who knows that I love Star Trek novels.
Me too, buddy.
And like, I don't want to stack these up, but I've been, this novel, The Final Reflection.
Oh, yes.
John Ford's The Final Reflection.
Yes, sir.
This is the definitive book written on the Klingon Empire.
Yes.
And if you want to know what a great Star Trek story is, if you want to understand the Klingons, this book, it's not canonical, but it's a better Klingon story than 90% of what we've ever seen in Star Trek. And the frustrating thing for me is, as a Star Trek novel fan, I've discovered my first James Blish's Spock Must Die in my elementary school library, Island Park Elementary School in Mercer Island, Washington. That's where I discovered it and read it. And I'm like, there's more thought and consideration put in to many of the Star Trek novels than anything we've been getting since 2017 on TV. Actually, since 2009, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movie. And it's frustrating. Same is true of Star Wars. It's frustrating when the best of the novels understand way more about the universe than the people that are getting really well paid to write Star Trek episodes or
Totally.
episodes. And it's like, I would say, if you're going to write for Star Trek, you should just read, if they only read one Star Trek novel, I would say this should be it. You know, and one of my favorite science fiction writers wrote this book, Corona. Greg Berry passed away back 2 years ago. But this book alone has more interesting science fiction concepts than most of modern Star Trek, which have barely any science fiction concepts.
Totally
And hell,
true.
just to keep going, here's another one. Early Star Trek book, Sonny Cooper's Black Fire, Spock becomes a space pirate. This is the kind of thing that they're writing today, but this is oh so much better.
I hear you, man. Larry Young just sent me a care package of Star Trek novels. So here, let me match what you were doing and everything. And these are a lot of the early ones. You can't even see them because of my blur.
Corona, that's it. That's the same book.
Oh, there you go.
I just showed the hardcover.
Yes, of course you did. Yes. Yeah. So I did just get Corona. He also sent me the box set of all the James Blish stuff. Well, James Blish, now all I knew him from was his Star Trek adaptations. Shame on me. I'm listening to an old X-1 science fiction anthology show, and it's a fantastic story. It's called Surface Tension, written by James Blish.
A very famous story, too.
Fantastic story. And a good adaptation of the short story as well.
Yeah.
You know, again, you're right, man. I mean, we get weak writers writing Star Trek these days. I'm sorry, everybody. It's just the way it is. And also when they go, well, you know, we do have a science advisor on the show. And that in the first season of Strange New Worlds, the Uhura episode where they're on the planetoid and they have the thing that's singing or whatever. And the crew member goes, well, as we all know, space is very loud. And it's like, that's not how my science class went. And, you know, I'm like, wait a minute. No, they're in a vacuum. I'm like, no, there's not sound. I'm sorry. And I don't know if there is, because I know there have been pulsars that I think they have done, and maybe there's sound or whatever.
But that's the thing. It's like they get one idea, like the idea of a tardigrade. You know, when Brian Fuller first developed Discovery, there was going to be a tardigrade crew member.
Right.
In the engineering section that worked with Stamets named Ephraim. And then they turned him into that spacefaring tardigrade that could like somehow travel through warp, you know, in the micellular network, which is just utterly ridiculous in the first place. Like, you have a propulsion system that's based on plants. And you're looking at this going, and you can tell because that wasn't in Fuller's original conception of the show. The entire thing about the micellular network was a terraforming issue. And when you read, I'm not saying I've read them, but if you read Fuller's original story outlines, there's about 150 pages where they beat out the entire first season. When Fuller was let go because of budgetary issues, because apparently they didn't realize they have to pay a lot up front because you have to build sets that you're going to amortize across the whole season. That's why it's expensive up front. You make up those costs later. They took those ideas and they wanted to make them, Kurtzman and the people he hired wanted to make them their own. So they're like, oh, well, there's like the micellular network. It'll be like Dune or something. And it just, okay, none of that works. You're telling me a starship is going to travel through a mushroom network of what? And so they adapted an idea that was about terraforming and turned it into a propulsion system. And you're like, come on, man, that's not credible. You can't have a propulsion system that takes you anywhere in the universe whenever you want. Why are you in the Milky Way galaxy then? Why don't you go 10 trillion light years away to another galaxy?
Well, you see how the instantaneous travel that Discovery shows with that ship. And I loved, again, in the first episode where they're like, oh, they're going to abandon the mycelial engines and stuff. And it's like, well, at least Discovery still has its one. And it's like, you guys do not get it. Goodbye. Go.
Well, that's
on the 8th episode, and you guys can leave now.
I mean, one of the things that drove me crazy in the second season with the Red Angel or whatever, they talk about how these beacons appeared all at the same time throughout the galaxy. And it's like, guys, light travels 186,000 miles per second. and all of these lights are in different parts of the galaxy. Some of them the light would have taken how long to get here? You can't just see these beacons and then we observe them. And when I see stuff like that, it's like even I, as a cursory, when I was a kid, I would have known. The reason it took him 75 years to get back from the Delta Quadrant is because of the distance. And when you're telling me that lights are turning on at the same time throughout the galaxy, I'm like, you people are stupid. And why are you writing the show?
They weren't paying attention to their grade school science class when they would say, this star is burning out. We're just seeing it now, but that happened thousands of years ago. I remember learning that in grade school science. It's like, again, these people are ridiculous. Wayne, I hear you. If the writers don't want to read, they can watch Star Trek the Animated Series to see how you can incorporate science fiction and story, because the same people that wrote the original series were writing the animated series. Samuel Peoples, was it Larry
Niven? He wrote Slaver Weapon, his Known Space series. I mean, how cool is that? His Known Space series crossed over with Star Trek. the chuffed captain of the Kazinti.
Good stuff, man.
It was.
I'm with you. I'm so with you. Absolutely. Rob, go ahead.
If I ever met Michelle Paradise, I'm like, it's like when Larry Niven wrote an episode of the animated series. She'd be like, well, who's Larry Niven? And was there an animated series? You mean it's not Prodigy or Lower Decks?
You're not talking about Really Short Treks, are you? That fantastic.
Oh, my God.
I know, dude, honest. And again, you see, Wayne is on, like I said, Wayne will be on my Monday show with my buddies Franco and Mitch as well. But really, I'm like kind of you on that show. And God bless them, they tolerate me. But truly, man, I was literally tearing my vast amount of hair out watching those very short treks. They weren't even funny, let alone clever or interesting. They were just gross.
I mean, that was an abasement of the franchise. I mean, and it's funny. People get mad at me for, well, Rob, you're an old man shouting at the Simpsons meme, which I've gotten 100 million times.
Me too,
and everybody,
buddy.
Everybody who sends it to me like, you're an old man shouting. No, I'm not an old man shouting at clouds. You might think I'm old, which guilty is charged, but this stuff is bad. It's stupid. And it's degrading to the franchise, which is why the franchise, I mean, it's really interesting because as an old school Trekker like myself, I love the original series, but you could make an argument that Star Trek reached its zenith in 1994 on when Next Generation ended its 7-year run with All Good Things. You had Generations coming out, whether you love Generations or not. It still was a feature film that brought both generations together, Shatner and Kirk and Picard. It was on the cover of Time magazine. When Next Generation ended with All Good Things, it went out with huge ratings, especially for a first run syndicated dramatic show. It changed the face. Star Trek The Next Generation proved 1 hour dramatic syndication could work, because before that it was all game shows and talk shows. Changed the face of TV, which led to our streaming that we have today.
Correct.
And Star Trek was at its most popular in 94 as a result of Next Gen. And then, obviously things started to change. I mean, I love Deep Space Nine, but that kind of was the bastard stepchild of everything. But
absolutely.
And it's unfair, because what happens when a post-scarcity utopian civilization has to deal with an existential threat from another part of the galaxy that isn't a utopian civilization, that is bent on destroying us, whether we deserve it or not? And when a war is thrust upon, it's like Aragorn saying, war is upon you, whether you wish it or not. And the great thing I love about Deep Space Nine, when people are like, well, Rob Roddenberry would have hated Deep Space Nine. And that might be true. But what I love about Deep Space Nine is it is about how do utopians maintain their utopian ideals in the face of an extinction event that is brought about by other sentient creatures who might have a point. Right. And that becomes fascinating.
When this summer at Terrificon, mid-August, I'll be at Terrificon, and here's the various Trek people that are going to be there. And right there in the center, underneath Chekhov, is Nana Vister, Major Kira.
She's amazing.
Absolutely, and the character is amazing.
Amazing.
And you go back to that first season, and you really understand that Kira, who was a terrorist, has to deal with this new the intrusion of Starfleet, and all the different things that happens to her character. And then in the 7th season, she has to teach the very oppressors that she was dealing with how to be terrorists.
And fall in love with Odo, a changeling.
Yes, and fall in love with Odo, absolutely. And it's great. And I'm looking forward to talking to Nana before the convention and have a Zoom talk or a StreamYard talk like we're doing.
She's amazing, and a woman who's in her 60s who proves that you never have to lose that sex appeal, because she's an incredible woman.
I could say the same about Terry Farrell, who is not quite 60, but I met her at Terrificon last year. Could not have been nicer. They're all all of them are so great. Me and Andrew Robinson had a wonderful conversation here, and that was terrific. And Frakes was great to me.
Andrew Robinson wrote one of the greatest Star Trek novels ever written, A Stitch in Time. And people forget that he did that. And these are Andrew. These are also, as actors, these are people who have really long running careers. And I mean, Andrew Robinson was the Psycho in Dirty Harry,
right?
He was Scorpio, and then he was, of course, in Clive Barker's Hellraiser back in '87.
And he was Liberace on his biography, and he was Kennedy on the '80s Twilight Zone.
Yes, he was.
Great actor, wonderful range. Could not have been sweeter. And again, Garrick, I mean, that's the great thing. DS9 evolved from Next Gen and gave us even more complicated characters. And Garrick is fantastic that way. At times you love him. At times he's ready to kill everybody because he's that is the only way out of a situation.
And Deep Space Nine gave us Section 31, where it was just one guy. One guy would show up, William Sadler, Sloan would show up. And now Discovery, to show how they don't... Section 31 in Discovery, they have their own memberships, they have their own comm badges, they have their headquarters, they have their own ships. It's like, no. The whole point of Deep Space Nine is that Deep Space Nine pointed out is Section 31 doesn't exist. You can't prove they exist. You don't know where they are. Sloan would just show up in Bashir's room and he'd walk out and he'd disappear. And that's the way it should have been. It should have stayed that way. Now we're getting a Section 31 movie that Michelle Yeoh herself says, well, it's Mission Impossible in space. And it's like, of course, because you don't know what Star Trek is. You never watched Deep Space Nine, so you don't even know what. And you're going to rip off.
Yeoh's fault. No, it's certainly not Michelle Yeoh's fault. It's again these writers. Well, dude, as you know, Strange New Worlds, they have the big trial for number 1 being revealed as being genetically enhanced. Compare that to Deep Space Nine, Dr. Bashir, I presume. And again, as opposed to asking the debatable question, there's a slippery slope with genetic enhancements, and that's why the Federation is careful about it. Instead, it's, well, this is discrimination, and this is just wrong. And it's really, it's like this bossy girl from Mean Girls suddenly is, scolding us that, well, that's the way it should be. And it's like, yeah, you really lost the message of the debate, because it isn't easy. And there was no equal weight to Starfleet and the Federation's point of view of, listen, we want people that are blind to be able to see, and we want to be able to help people with scientific advances. However, we had this real threat from Khan, in the 90s.
Yeah, and Spock said it. The scientists forgot that when you breed superior human beings, you get superior ambition.
Yep.
And he says it in Space Seeds. So and also what they also forget is eugenics was something that was spoken about here in American history in really ugly ways to get rid of certain races.
That's right.
The Germans with their eugenics programs, the Ubermensch and all of that. Eugenics programs go back to the 1800s. And it's a really ugly idea. And in science fiction, when you deal with things like Gattaca, does a really great job of dealing with, Ethan Hawke's character being somebody who's not genetically enhanced and it proves that a human being can step up to the level. Just because you are given genetic gifts through genetic tampering doesn't mean that people necessarily who aren't that way are lesser human beings.
Agreed.
And Blade Runner, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. We've been dealing with this in science fiction all the time. And with Una's backstory, it felt like no one ever even thought about the fact that these have been dealt with not just in Star Trek history, but in science fiction and in our literature for the last 100 years.
You're right.
And because nobody on the show knew, and I'll tell you something else. Una's entire backstory was stolen from Dorothy Fontana's one Star Trek novel, Vulcan's Glory.
Read it.
And they never gave her credit,
What an insult.
just like Strange New Worlds ripped off Ursula K. Le Guin's story, Those Who Walk Away from Umlaus, which is a great short story where one child, you have this utopian civilization that everybody's living in this perfect life, but one child has to take the pain and the suffering of all. They just flat out ripped that short story off without accreditation. And if you go back to the original series, Arena, that Frederick Brown is credited for, Gene Kuhn, like, they thought that, this skews really close to a Frederick Brown short story, and they admitted, like, well, maybe I read that, I don't know, right. But they gave him credit anyway. Now, Ursula K. Le Guin is no longer with us. I don't believe so. I think she's not, and neither and Dorothy Fontana is. And of course, Dorothy Fontana isn't either.
And good Lord, Dorothy Fontana, the first lady, literally, of Star Trek,
who defined the Vulcans, the Vulcans, and it's like they're just going in there and taking this stuff. I don't even know if I can say this. But I'm going to say it anyway because I'm shocked by this. So Dave Blass, who is the production designer of Star Trek Picard Season 3.
Okay.
He lives in Toronto. He's a local where they shoot. He did a 90-page presentation for Starfleet Academy. 90 pages. It is, and I've seen lots of presentations of all different kinds of people in my time in the industry.
Sure.
It is one of the most impressive documents I've ever seen as far as production design, and because he's a huge Star Trek fan, they wouldn't even see him. And he did Picard Season 3. He rebuilt. I'm sure they had already hired somebody, but to look at that document, I mean, it shows right there. It's like, this guy, I don't know what you're doing with Star Trek, but this guy proves he already did Picard Season 3 for you. So you have multiple starships, you have Federation things. I mean, he did such great work. But this document is one of the most incredible. If you were to publish this as an art book, it doesn't, have the text. You could have somebody write text. Jeff Bond could write the text. Okay. They should publish this book, Dave Blass's Unseen Starfleet Academy. It's incredible. Didn't get brought back.
No, I hear you, man, and I'm in Metallis's camp as well. And also, the thing everybody has to remember regarding Picard Season 3, because the majority of us loved it, and the thing is, they were operating with less money than and I don't know about the COVID year, obviously, with Season 2, but he was operating with less money, and they managed to make it work and be effective and impressive. And it's like, so that's why you need a Dave Blass. The way these people, they spend money, to use the metaphor, like a drunken sailor. When Ash, in the first season of Discovery, they're in the mess hall, and he puts his feet up on a table, and you see the gold lame edges on his shoes. It's like, you're spending money on that, but you couldn't find money in the budget to get better writers? What the fuck is going on?
Well, are there better writers? I mean,
well, but they're not working on Star Trek,
right? Man. I mean, you're seeing we're living in what they did to him was that, to me, it was the most anti-Star Trek thing I've ever. But again, it shows the fact that this younger generation, this activist generation, they all are. We saw it, unfortunately, a week ago or 2 weeks ago with what happened to Ed Piskor, and which is a damn shame, but. It drives me bananas what goes on. But I think that, we are living through a golden age. Look at a husband and wife team that are bringing us Shogun. Hulu Shogun.
Great show.
Unbelievable. I mean, Shogun 44 years ago in 1980, when they first adapted Clavel's novel, is one of my favorite things I ever. Shogun is, and I try and explain this to people, Shogun is a Star Trek story.
100% it is.
Shogun is about a man from the Federation who travels to a different world, an alien world that's completely, and he finds himself lost, stranded in an alien world, and in the best Star Trek tradition, ends up getting embroiled in the politics, learning new traditions, seeing these aliens that, and he has to come up to their level, even though they're very different than him. And it's funny. That's why I've always thought when I was a kid, and I was 13 when Shogun was on, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing like ever.
Me
And
too.
I've watched Shogun, and now seeing the new version, I was so worried it was going to be terrible. But here you have two people, and a husband and wife, the showrunners, they knew what they're doing. And you look at Shogun and you're like, that's a Star Trek show. You know, people look at me like, what? I go, Shogun, Star Trek should be the Tiffany, the gold standard of what science fiction on TV is. It has become the bottom, well, Doctor Who's probably in the lower basement than Star Trek, but Shogun is the gold standard, Doctor Who. But
new Doctor Who.
Oh my God. But Shogun, if somebody said to me, what's the best Star Trek show on TV? Shogun is the best Star Trek show on TV.
You've made the analogy before too. Hunt for Red October is a great Star Trek story. Master and Commander is a great Star Trek story.
The West Wing. The West Wing was a great Star Trek TV show.
Yes. Oh my God. And again, the way they handled with whatever that anomaly was called last year on Discovery. And it's like, all right, well, now you've got an opportunity to really do a West Wing kind of episode where the Federation, for all the different planets, what do you think we ought to do? What do you think we ought to do? No, we get a knucklehead story. And I always love, and I always pick on all of new Trek, until Picard season 3, you had this background actor in a Ferengi mask, never speaking, but just always like a kid in 4th grade that doesn't understand what's going on. And it's just like, Jesus, man, can we have another race beyond Saru's and the president who was multi-racial or whatever?
Yeah.
Can we have somebody else talk? Because again, it's like, well, what do the Klingons think of this? What do the Romulans think of this? All the different races.
Well,
and we never get.
And that's the funny thing. What is the geopolitical situation in the galaxy? If they show this, I mean, it's so funny to me that Discovery goes into the future and leans into the post-apocalyptic. They turn the Star Trek universe into a post-apocalyptic landscape because that's all anybody knows how to do is dystopia. It's harder to write a utopia than it is to write a dystopia. Because these people don't know how to build. They can't envision what a future would be like. That's why everything is so of today. You know, it's like, let's lean back on our activist culture today. And I think that's what, people are, it's not like we're anti any kinds of people. What we're about though is if you bring the politics of the future and make it of today, it's no longer speculative fiction. It's no longer science fiction. You're not extrapolating. First of all, it's very unimaginative. It's very uncreative, and it's easy because the people writing aren't science fiction fans. So they can't, science fiction takes, Brian Aldiss said that science fiction was always a way to, in our confused state of technological achievement, it was a way that we made sense of our world, that we don't quite know where it's going and where all of this is taking us. So science fiction was a way to try and examine that and sort of extrapolate where might we go and what are we going to have to deal with. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. All those moments. I've seen C-beams glittering in the dark near the Tannhauser Gate. All those moments will be lost in time like tears in the rain. Because replicants had souls. And humans didn't think that artificial people could. But they did. And they were being... It was the same thing in The Measure of a Man, 2nd season of TNG. Whoopi Goldberg says, disposable people. You're going to create an entire race of disposable people. And Picard's like, you're talking about slavery. Now, you finally had to say it. You had to say the word slavery to make people understand, but you're dealing with an android. You're dealing with Sung's creation, positronic brain. And if you could figure out how to duplicate that, which, by the way, in Picard season number 1, it's no one saw that episode. No one. It is the most,
because we have the disposable race in the synths on Mars that are totally disposable. Yes, they missed the point completely. Poor Melissa Snodgrass. Thank God people like you and I are raising a torch to her and going, "You're awesome, buddy. We don't know what the hell they did to your shit," but all they did was ruin the best episode of season 2.
Well, it's clear that no one had actually watched The Measure of a Man. That's the thing that kills me. I don't think Alex Kurtzman ever watched Space Seed. When I watched Star Trek Into Darkness, which I think is one of the worst big budget science fiction movies ever made, they don't know who Khan is. If you were to ask Alex Kurtzman, who was Khan Noonien Singh? Where did he come from? Because in Strange New Worlds, apparently he's from Toronto. I mean, they completely changed the timeline, and it's like, I cannot watch this garbage. Because you people prove episode after episode you haven't watched your own continuity, and at the same time you gaslight your own audience going, "Oh no, this is the continuity." I'm like, you can't change characters that you didn't create. Star Trek pioneered the idea. The most genius thing was when they used the rejected pilot, The Cage, in the 2-part episode The Menagerie in the first season of the original series, because they showed us what you're watching is 11 years ago. So you got to see the bridge of the Enterprise with a different captain, slightly different colors, different uniforms, and you're like, wow, there's now a continuity here. In Wrath of Khan, you show me a man who I haven't seen in 15 years who wants to kill me. You now have a timeline. So you can go from Space Seed to Wrath of Khan. It's been 15 years. And then before Space Seed, it was 11 years ago. So suddenly Star Trek, its fictional universe, has a continuity. It has canon. We've seen it on camera. The people who, for the 30th anniversary, the crew of the Deep Space Nine uses the Orb of Time and goes back to goes back to Trouble with Tribbles.
Trouble with Tribbles, yeah.
And you see the Enterprise the way it looked in 1966. In 1996, 30 years later, nobody came out and said, we have to redesign the Enterprise. No, the Enterprise, that's history. It's a history of the future that will never exist, but with its in its own continuity, it has a history. That's why people love Lord of the Rings. That's why people love Game of Thrones. That's why people love Star Trek and Star Wars and Doctor Who. New writers of Doctor Who, let's subvert where the Doctor came from. I mean, it's unbelievable to me that they don't understand part of the value of being a fan is you can go back. Star Trek is the most documented fictional universe of all time. I have shelves of books over there.
So do I.
Chronologies, technical manuals, blueprints. I mean, it's all there, and they don't. It's apparent that the people working on Star Trek now don't look at any of this stuff.
And also you got Kurtzman in all of those pre-launch of season 5 interviews he did, and we've created different treks for different fans, and like Pee Wee Herman, I meant to do that. No, you didn't. And you're full of shit. And we all know you're full of shit. And it was never necessary. It's, we never wanted to make Star Trek for everyone. No? Well, Jesus, it certainly worked for almost 50 years prior to you idiots taking shit over and ruining it the way that you have.
I fell in love with Star Trek when I was 5 years old. And every year that went by, Star Trek meant something new, and I got to see something new in it. My entire life, I'm 5 years old watching Star Trek in 72. In 79, Star Trek The Motion Picture comes out when I started junior high. My teenage years. Then I've got Wrath of Khan. I've got Search for Spock. In 1986, when Voyage Home came out, first year of college. And Star Trek has grown up with me up until 2009. When they're like, nope, we're going to go back and retell the story of Kirk and Spock. And I'm like, wow, my life up to this point, I have been watching Star Trek grow and breathe. It started in 66. In 2009, Star Trek was 43 years old then? And it's like, you guys, 43 years old. So you're like, and you're going to, rather than move forward, you're going to go back and retell Kirk and Spock, but you're now going to reframe it in a Star Wars box.
I hear you, man, but at least it was a different time. It was the Kelvin universe, and our old continuity still existed. But what they've
Right,
done
but the thing is, they weren't going forward. They weren't. Star Trek has lived, evolved, and changed with the times. Now Star Trek or Star Wars, I said Star Wars. Star Trek is now, it's no longer commenting on our time. It is our time.
Oh, 100%.
And that's what is the mistake.
Well, and also again, these weird choices and without any real explanation how it works. But again, in Strange Worlds, when they or introduce the idea that the eugenics war keeps getting pushed further into the future, how the fuck does that work?
Well, and also this idea too that's so stupid that the Star Trek past is our exact past.
Yep.
I mean, in the first actually, the end of the second season in Assignment Earth, when Gary 7 is introduced, there's a nuclear weapons platform that didn't really exist in history. It's not real. It's fake. We share a past, but it's not the same past. So in the Star Trek universe, the eugenics wars broke out in the 90s. And this idea that they're like, I don't think any person other than people working on Star Trek today think that it's supposed to be our past. And I know when Greg Cox wrote his Khan novels, he was like, well, how come we didn't have a real eugenics wars? And I'm like, because Star Trek is a fictional universe. It's Star Trek is the history of a future that will never occur. Right. Just like any future, just like any alternate universe. And, in Blade Runner 2049, no one thought to themselves, well, when Blade Runner was made, there were no cell phones. And Blade Runner took place in 2019, and the technology was no. Denis Villeneuve said Blade Runner is not our future. So in Blade Runner 2049, we're going to have like wooden balls that have data on them. And we're going to use it's an analog future. And because that didn't matter. What mattered is the idea of replicants, the idea of artificial people. What would they be like? What does it mean to us? And they know that. But the people that make modern Star Trek, it's like, no, we're going to push the eugenics. If you push the eugenics wars forward, if you're going to do that, then just say this isn't the continuity. Don't try and make Star Trek Online shoehorn the Discovery into the goddamn game. It drives me crazy.
I'm with you,
because that stuff is so ill thought of.
Chris Zubin, I agree with, and I know Rob does too. Star Trek is at best when both sides of the argument are given a believable rationale, not really something I've seen in the new stuff, what little I've seen. No, man, again, they tell you how to think rather than think for yourself. Private Little War, man. Great Vietnam analogy from the original series.
Hey, I don't suppose I could duck out for like a second.
By all means, man. I'll keep vamping while you're
entertain the masses. I'll be right back.
No, you're a good man for sticking around. It's all good, man. Hilarious. See, this is why I have the guy on, man, is this kind of conversation. Here, I'm going to take some comments made by the audience, and we'll keep going here. Let's see. Cooper says, yeah, the Spock character is way too human. The Cage was the pilot. They hadn't figured out the Spock character at that point. That shouldn't be the basis for emo Spock. No, in fact, Nimoy in an interview said Jeffrey Hunter playing Pike was playing it cold, so I felt it was okay to, smile and the things he did. And then he said, Shatner comes in, very emotional, very hot. And he goes, you can't have two hot people. So I pulled back a bit. And then Gene Kuhn is the man that really gave Spock the ammunition. I want to say it was in the Corbinite maneuver when they were observing what was going on. And Spock made the, comment fascinating. And it was like, say it a little more like this really does shock you or impress you. You're not scared. You're just intrigued by the mystery that's being presented. And that's when Spock became Spock. And it still took a couple episodes to really get him to the Spock we knew. So, yeah, Mike says as far as we know for sure Strange New Worlds and therefore Disco are altered timelines. They admitted in season 2 of Strange New Worlds. Yeah, they did, but again, in a very clunky way. Hey, Lorenzo, you say you've got some other great black and white anthology shows that Rob should watch. Well, I bet because Rob and I are such TV nerds, we've probably seen them, but I would love to hear your list. So if you are still watching, please give us some examples. Chris again says, people don't realize it, but Spock is in the menagerie had just had some pod far. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. B things. When I was 12 in 2008, I tried to reconcile Star Trek's history with their own, but then I realized I didn't need it to match up. I reiterate that I was 12 when I figured this out. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I also love that when Rob is gesturing, that sometimes he gets the emojis happening on his screen. Yeah, let's see if the thumbs. Ah, there you go. Fantastic. This is why I call you Magic Man. There you go.
So I got this book. I just picked this up.
Please.
So I mean, I've had this book when it came out. So
Sure.
this book was written by Mike and Denise Akuda,
Yep.
who were the art department. Mike started working on Star Trek. His first Star Trek job was on Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. He's worked on all of the Berman era iterations of Star Trek. Now he's working on For All Mankind with Denise.
Yes.
So this book, and if you look at it, this is the second version. This book is the entire chronology of the Star Trek universe. Now, this kind of stuff, I grew up worshiping because it has everything contextualized. Now, if you go and you look at the very beginning, the first entry in this book is 15 billion years ago.
Okay.
In the Star Trek universe.
Okay.
15 billion years ago. Here's the first entry. The universe was formed in a massive explosion known as the Big Bang. In the aftermath of the explosion, matter and energy gradually condensed into the universe we know today. At least 2 members of the Q continuum, traveling back from the future, took refuge in the first moments of the cosmos. One, the individual later known as Quinn, also briefly tried to conceal the Starship Voyager in the maelstrom of creation. And then underneath, it gives you accreditation, scientific theory. The Q's visits were established in the episode Death Wish in Voyager.
Yeah.
That's the first entry in this book. This book is hundreds of pages long. Hundreds of pages. So what happens is modern Star Trek rolls along, and because they have no care at all about continuity, everything in this book is thrown into disarray.
Right.
Because and I don't expect it's not fair to expect, but this is part of where Star Trek fandom comes from. Because when I was a kid growing up, getting these books and diving into this stuff, when you have somebody who actually works on the show, who's worked on Star Trek in terms of continuity from The Voyage Home all the way through Enterprise, hundreds of years of Star Trek history, and then they write this. This is part of why you become a fan, because the universe is real. Well, and somebody is documenting it, and then the people that work on the show then go back and have these books to look into and go, oh, okay.
100%, Rob. Well, also all the novels that came out, the picture novels where they adapted the original series.
The photo novels.
The photo novels. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that period from when Star Trek was first in syndication to the 79 movie, we weren't hurting for more stories because we were getting them in books and the source books and the technical manuals and things like the Akuda's timeline.
And David Gerald, who wrote, he wrote Trouble with Troubles. He worked on Cloudminders. He wrote a Star Trek novel called The Galactic Whirlpool, which gave, like, when I was reading that novel, to me, that novel was canon because David Gerald wrote it. So why wouldn't it be?
100%, man. And like you said, most of the Star Trek novelists gave a shit more. And of course, we're vetted. Michael Jan Friedman's been on my show many times. He's going to be on in a couple of weeks because he has a new project. And I demand every time I talk to him to talk about a couple specific Star Trek novels because he wrote so many. And he wrote
and Michael Jan Friedman did something that I would normally have said, you can't do that. He wrote the X-Men Star Trek The Next Generation crossover novel, which is awesome.
Yes, it is.
So, I mean, and it's, I don't know.
New ideas. I mean, Peter David, and I know you've talked about the New Frontier books with Mackenzie Calhoun.
There's, why don't you adapt that? Adapt that.
I hear you, Mike. I hear you, Rob. Absolutely. Yeah. Fred, you're right. My God. Well, there's Mike Conrad. Who,
but it's the funny thing is that now what's maddening is there's an episode of Discovery where you're looking at the exterior of a turbolift and it's on rails like it's a roller coaster car, and you're like, does anyone who work on this show, have you ever look? I mean, you can look at blueprints. You can look at, there's blueprints of the Enterprise D, the Enterprise A. Do you guys not understand? It's not a Star Destroyer. There's not these giant empty cavernous space. They even have an action scene in this gigantic empty space that you're supposed to think is on the Discovery somewhere. And I'm watching this and I'm like, who's making this show? Like, tell me you've never watched Star Trek or delved into Star Trek without telling me you've never delved into Star Trek. And by the way, this frustration, I don't think is born out of me being a white, middle-aged cis male that doesn't want to see representation. It has nothing to do with that. I want that representation. What I want is I want somebody to give me a believable, fictitious universe that I've been following my entire life that I can believe in. Like I said, you have to have truth in your fiction. And we're seeing all of our franchises now have the same problem, all of them, which is the people that are now creating new entries into the franchises haven't done the work.
What?
They haven't done the work. And why? Because it's so daunting. There's 50 years, 60 years in Doctor Who's case, 58 years in Star Trek, actually more than 60 years, 58 years in the case of Star Trek. So everyone's like, well, and nobody wants to delve into it. And I'm like, you are killing the value of your own franchise by not making it work within established continuity. And by the way, established continuity means that don't go and think you're being cheeky by going back to Harlan Ellison's original draft of City on the Edge of Forever and turning the Guardian of Forever into some ambulatory humanoid that's like Doctor Who, which they did in Discovery.
Yes, they did.
Brass from CSI is now the fucking Guardian of Forever.
A great character actor, but unfortunately, again, it's not his fault. It's a ridiculous idea. Another thing that writer of Future Imperfect brought up, just randomly, was talking about how the Jeffries tube set, he's like, that's like one of the last times we used it was in this episode. And Lisa Klink said, well, we built a new one. I don't think they use Jeffries tubes anymore. And what's ridiculous is not only does it show the confinement of what should be a limited space within a starship, but it also provides you with different camera angles that just, subconsciously for the eye might be more appealing than the cable car turbo lift or Pike's fireplace in his gigantic captain's quarters.
But it also gives you a belief because we all live in the real world. We all know that if you need to access plumbing, you got to get under a sink, or you have to get into the wall somehow. We understand that. And a starship, which is based on like a naval vessel, there's not unlimited space. No. Space is at a premium. That's why cabins aren't huge. Kirk didn't have some palatial condo in the middle of the Enterprise somewhere. And it's you're on a naval vessel. And I think that what's happened across all of our franchises is this idea that whether you're being crushed under the weight of continuity or canon. I mean, I'll say this. One of the great examples to me of canon, modern canon, is House of the Dragon. The Game of Thrones prequel, because we'd heard about these things, and whatever you think of how Game of Thrones ended, and obviously Weiss and Benioff, there was no more books to follow, so whatever. But Game of Thrones House of the Dragon had George R. R. Martin come back. He had already told the story of the Dance with Dragons in sort of more of a historical form, not in novel form, but so he had the story. He knows where it's going. They've done that first season brought everybody back to a franchise that was essentially dead, that people were angry about. It's still great. The first 5 seasons of that show are still amazing. A lot of it's amazing. I mean, it's really the last 6 episodes that really are bad. Season 7 goes down that direction, but season 8 is a complete betrayal of what's happened, because Danny, who's been riding this wave of being a good leader and then being a despot, is suddenly just going to go crazy like her grandfather because she was supposed to. It's like that doesn't make any sense. But House of the Dragon comes back and sets up this incredible conflict, does a wonderful job establishing these characters, heartbreakingly takes these 2 childhood friends and puts them on opposing sides, sets up an incredible conflict, and it works because the people who are making that show are like, well, I can't fuck this up, and there is no thought like that with Star Trek, because somebody wrote here,
Lazy writing in Hollywood, or
no, it was something that said that they don't treat somebody I thought I missed somebody. I think they were saying that they don't treat Star Trek, as being real, or that was the idea essentially.
Okay.
And the thing about the Star Trek universe is the first rule of business is this is what it was. Yeah, Christopher Zubin's comment. They feel comfortable doing this with Star Trek because it's streaming and nobody really. I don't think it's because it's streaming. I think it's because nowadays Star Trek, like always, has been ghettoized by any. Rick Berman believes still to this day, he believes he was above Star Trek. Rick Berman is a man of taste, and he traveled all around the world making Big Blue Marble in the 70s. He's a guy that's incredibly well traveled, loves culture, and he got saddled with this show as kind of his last hurrah at Paramount that he fell into. And he did a good job, but it was the last thing he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I just think that these cultural touchstones, and also these shows should be outside of what's going on in our culture now.
Sure.
You can't make these shows. I mean, if you want to talk about gender identity issues, they did that in Next Generation in episodes like The Outcast or the Trill species, where a Trill could be a male or female. Over their entire lifetime, they might be 10 of each. They did that in a science fiction way, but by suddenly hitting it on the nose, it's no longer an action adventure allegorical science fiction show. Now you're just preaching, and you're picking an ideological side based on our politics today. Now, you could say that Star Trek was always progressive, and indeed it was, but it was progressive in the sense that humanity had a future, and that ultimately there is one race of human beings on this planet, which I've said, the human race. We might have different ethnicities, but as we move out into the stars, the aliens we meet are not going to be like, oh, you're a black earther, or you're an Asian earther. We're just all going to be from Earth. And the idea that Star Trek said to all of us is that when the human race becomes a spacefaring civilization, we are indeed the human race. That any ideas of racism or the petty differences we have being earthbound are going to be swept away, as we're all from Earth now. We're all one. The way we are ultimately are, there's one race of humans on this planet, the human race. That's it. We might have different ethnicities, but when we go out into space and we meet alien cultures, they're not going to see differences in color. They're not going to be worried about, oh, you're from this place, you're from that place. They're not going to think about our ethnic strife. They're going to say, you're from that planet. It's like the astronauts first seeing Earth from the moon, looking back and seeing that big blue and white marble in space. And how few people on Earth have ever had that experience. But they look back and they're like, everything that's ever happened to the human race is happening on that little tiny speck in the dark infinitude of the cosmos. And we still can't get it together. And Star Trek says one day we will.
Another article that you pointed out and I wanted to discuss with you was, and I don't remember the source and I don't remember the writer's name, but essentially pointed out the fact that for Star Trek to work, you have to believe in institutions like the Federation, like Starfleet. And in today's society, never have institutions been questioned more than ever. And maybe because of that, a younger audience can't relate to the idea of, oh, the Federation's a good group of people doing the best and everything. Same with Starfleet and stuff. No, the writer's attitude is there's got to be something rotten.
Well, of course, yeah. Starfleet is rotten. Yeah, that was, it's funny. That's why I read that article, because I'd never considered that before.
Me neither. It was a great revelation. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now we're so, you're right that nowadays everybody wants to believe that all institutions are rotten. And not only that, let's go further. They believe Western civilization itself is rotten.
Yep.
But that's because I hate to say this, but we have a whole generation of people that did not understand or do not understand that life is hard. And this idea that there are safe spaces, when you are born, there's no safe space.
Yeah.
And you are destined to die. There's no way around that. And I feel that nowadays people just don't realize that you are living on borrowed time. And the time that you're here on this planet, it's not the world's job to make you happy. Star Trek told me, boldly go. That doesn't mean you sit at home and you wait for people to treat you the way you want to be treated. You've got to get up and open that door and go out into the universe and make the life that you want for yourself. And you know what? Like, it's like my dad said, my dad always said that life is hard. And when you go out into the world, it's up to you to make of yourself what you want to be, because the world isn't going to do it for you. And don't expect anybody else to do it either.
Absolutely, man. No, 100% on that. Chris Subin again says Starfleet should be interacting with backward aliens cultures who, in fact, represent our current world. Well,
that's what classic Trek did.
Yeah, Dan Shan, a guy who was doing a Star Trek show for a while with our buddy Larry Young. I was on their show once, and Dan's like, the Federation is really greedy because they're going to especially in the original series, because they're going to all these worlds. It's like, so you have any dilithium for us? We'd really like some dilithium or whatever. And I'm like, no, man. I go, Starfleet and the Federation, they were the Peace Corps. I mean, They really were this analogy of, hey, we're going to these underdeveloped countries, and we certainly we're going to give you clean water. We're just going to show you a better way, but we don't want to fuck up the way you're doing things.
Right. You talk about dilithium to in Mirror, one of my favorite Trek episodes.
Right, the Hawkins.
The Hawkins say, the leader of the Halkan Council says, well, Captain, you do have the might to take them from us. And Kirk says, but we won't.
That's right.
I hope you consider that,
Yep.
And that was, like you said, it's the Peace Corps. I mean, look, you can say, it's undeniable that Star Trek is America goes to space. I mean, sure. I get it. It's not only that, it's the Kennedy America going to space. Yeah. But it was that idealism, that idealism in the 60s that, imagine with all the tumult that was going on, the race riots, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, the assassinations, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cold War, Vietnam. There was no reason to think. I mean, the world was tearing itself apart more. People now are like, "Oh, the world's tearing itself apart now." No. There's been tumultuous times in all of human history. It's just now we have it 24/7 with the black mirrors that we keep in our pockets all day long. But back then, you still had people that believed in. That's what they got the name Black Mirror from.
Sure.
We had that that optimism, and that's what Star Trek was all about. Well, now Star Trek itself is being made by people that aren't optimistic. They don't believe in institutions. It's like, I can't understand that for all of its faults. People talk about, Western civilization. Remember, Britain first and the United States, we stopped slavery. Slavery was something that went on and still goes on. It's been going on in human history for thousands of years. But the Brits and the Americans said, no. We fought a war over it. And does that mean, like, everybody who's lived wants the world to be perfect? It's not. Right. But we ended a practice that had been going on for millennia.
Yeah.
And we stopped it. Now, are we still racist? Fuck, sure.
Sure.
But it's a slow process. You can't expect it to all happen, but we did stop it. And after the Reformation, after the Dark Ages, the Age of Enlightenment, Western civilization has done. Where else would you want to live on the world? People are talking about you. There was this young Marxist conference in Melbourne last week or 2 weeks ago, over Easter weekend. And you've got all these people, workers rise up, as if no one's seen that before.
Right.
I mean, my God, you want to see what happens? Watch the 3-body problem, the first episode of the 3-body problem. That shows you where our young charges are at. They're one step away from pitchforks and unfortunately, we saw an example of that just this past week with the great Ed Piskor, who, if you've ever watched Cartoonist Kayfabe, one of the great celebrations, other than your channel, celebrations of comic book. That channel is amazing. And I have to say that I think one of the great, and I would say this, people even question me calling Ed a legend. I would say that Hip Hop Family Tree is one of the most important comic works of the 21st century.
I agree with you, Rob. And in fact, I had Ed on my show many times. I knew Jim Rugg better because I had more face-to-face interactions with Jim, his partner on Cartoonist Kayfabe. But I liked Ed, Ed was a little off center.
He
But
was
also,
wacky. I mean, you look at him. He was, and it's like what's so funny about Ed is I don't think he had a malicious bone in his body, but he was a product of where he grew up and what he knew. And like a lot of artists, he's a little cracked, but he
well, and
wasn't. He wasn't what people said he was. I mean,
well, I listen. It was a 17-year-old girl who he did call a dirty girl a couple times, whether he was joking or not. And that's like,
yeah, but you know what though? That's far different. As I said on my show, he had interaction with her. I mean, she was an R. Crumb, Gigi Allen fan.
Yes,
as he put it, and knowing
right.
like everybody, when you're talking to somebody, when you want to appear like you can converse,
sure.
And knowing, look, if you're a Gigi Allen fan, you've seen Hated, the Todd Phillips documentary, who's bringing us Joker for All You Do. If you see his documentary, it's not like, and I get she was 17, but I mean, when I went to college with people that were 17.
I understand, and that's closer in age.
And by the way, there was no dick pics, and there was no weird.
Totally agree.
There was, and to me, I mean, look, my sensibilities and humor can be off color, it can be sexual, it can be all kinds of things, but too. I'm not untoward. And I'll say one thing: I think all artists we like someone like John Schnepp, for instance, the late great John Schnepp. John Schnepp loved other people's creativity. He didn't care if they were men or women. He didn't care how old you were. Yeah. He loved if you gave him a piece of comic art that you drawn or anything, he loved that. He reveled in other people's work. And I think Ed Piskor was the same kind of guy. If you look at him, he lived and breathed the art form of comics. And there's a lot of people that could never touch him. Now, artists, we appreciate beauty wherever we find it, but somebody said to me, "Oh, he had some Lolita complex." I'm like, Lolita was 12 when Humbert met Lolita in the book. She was 12. She was underage, and a 17-year-old girl in Pennsylvania is not underage.
You're right about that. I was going to point that out as well.
There's not pedophilia going on there, right. And people don't understand. Pedophiles are interested in children. And there's a cutoff point, I think, even legally. 17-year-old girls that are on the cusp of going to college are not that. And now we have these.
Paul McCartney a pedophile for she was just 17. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
it's
Stray Cat Strut, and
I heard you mention the Stray Cats.
I mean, it's like, do you guys not? It's because no one lived through the 70s. No one look at groupies. I mean, it's so weird that we have a civilization, especially of young people. On one hand, you have an entire generation that's on OnlyFans, commodifying their bodies and their sexuality, which is beyond my comprehension. Because, I had people, when we were 12, 13, 14, 15, you're kissing girls for the first time. You're stealing off, going into the woods and experimenting. Now people are becoming non-binary because they're watching porn at 12 going, I don't want that to happen. That's the most horrific stuff I've ever seen in my life. And then they grow up and they're like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. I wouldn't have wanted to see that when I was 12. I was not capable.
Modesty as well. I agree with you. Yeah.
It's destroyed youth. It's destroyed. People are seeing things. And now it's like, look, I don't think that education and growing up is a process. And if we're giving adult material to kids at 12, which we are, you're a keystroke away from watching whatever sexual fetish. You're not equipped mentally at 12, 13, 14 to know what that is. And it's damaged people's normal development.
I agree. It's absolutely agree with all that. Yeah, man. No, and again, I mean, Ed Piskor had the worst week of his life before ending that life. And
in a week,
it shouldn't have ended that way. It shouldn't have ended that way.
And I'll tell you something else. I don't like the fact that everybody, in order to cover their bases because of our corporate world, and they don't want to have to pay insurance and they don't want to get in trouble, that people would rather just, no, we'll just cancel his gallery opening because we can't take a risk. But you know what? I think in the case of Ed Piskor, you could have. I think somebody should have stood up and said, no, we're going to let you do your gallery show. And I get where everybody's coming from because there's been so many people that have proven to be, I mean, Harvey Weinstein was a real predator. You know, he's in jail because he was probably a really a kid that could never get laid in high school anyway. He used his position to lord it over women, the thing that he could never get when he was younger. He used his position of power. He threatened people. He coerced people. He was terrible. Ed Piskor was not Harvey Weinstein.
No.
At all.
No laws were broken. He said some inappropriate things in the text. But if you saw those...
But inappropriate things compared to, I mean, if you look at all the inappropriate things people have done, he was just being, I think, because he was being playful.
I agree with you.
If you look at when he says stuff like, "Oh, you could be my partner in crime, can I try?" He would say that. It says that on his website.
Yeah, it's not. It wasn't a sexual thing. No, I agree. And frankly,
some people are like, well, that was just a euphemism. It's like, you know what? Look at how he dressed. And when he met her, he's like, what, 36 or something? Yeah, he was an arrested adolescent, like so many of us that are in the comic book Star Trek world. I mean, in my mind, I'm still 12.
No, I hear you, man. I feel the same way. I'm the oldest 14-year-old that you'll ever meet. Absolutely. But again, listen, bud, I've had other friends that have gotten in trouble for things they said, nothing to the extreme.
I have.
Was subjected to. I know you have. But not in, and again, we were talking about it off the air, but nothing untoward to a younger woman or anything, or at least, I mean, those.
No, I did untoward things when I was a younger man, 13, 14.
And there you
and they were all willing.
No, I get it, man. No, and again, it
was a mutual thing.
You got to read the room. I had a good friend in sports radio who made a comment about one of the Monday Night Football sideline reporters and saying, is she dressed for covering football? Or is she going to be a presenter at the AVN Awards? And he got fired the next day. And it was a kind of last strike. He had other problems, so it was kind of like the final thing. But it's like, he's like, I was treated unfairly. And I'm like, Dan, I love you, but you got to read the room.
You got to read the room.
And really, man, we're in this reverse McCarthyism where it was the conservative side that was jumping on the liberals. And now unfortunately, it is the extreme liberals that are, and because I consider myself a classic liberal, but that are real, they're the ones with the pitchforks and the torches storming the castle, and that's the thing, man. And also the Orville did a great episode about it, where social media really dictates how society works, and Jesus,
it does. I mean, and if you look at I'm a big fan of Jonathan Haidt's work, and I don't know if you've read Jonathan Haidt's books about the coddling of the American. Well, he didn't write that, but he's written a lot of books about what's happened because of social media to the youth of America. And his work is really, really great. And they're looking at data, and all of it stems back to 2012, 2013, when all these kids, smartphones arrived, the iPhone arrived in 2007. And you have a generation that were given these phones. And it wasn't until 2012, 2013, where this ideological McCarthyism started to take hold. Race relations in the United States were fine. It was evolving. We had same-sex marriage. You had people being better. Romeo and Juliet. You could have a black or white Romeo or Juliet and a white opposite. Nobody cared until 2013. And that's when things started to go awry. And we were doing well. And yet now what I find disturbing is that everybody wants to do the right thing. And now online, if you come out for a cause, it's really easy to be sitting behind a keyboard. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to talk to anybody directly, and you can come out and say whatever you want about people, or you can like a cause or whatever, and you have to put no effort into it other than type something.
That's right.
And you immediately, for no effort at all, you don't have to make anything. You don't have to create art. You don't have to paint. You don't have to build. You don't have to make a film. You can just, your opinion or what will give you accolades from people. You get thumbs up, or people are going to do this or that. And that's how people get their, like for me, I have to go out into the world. I have to go make something. I have to put out effort. And it's the effort that's my reward, not the accolades that come at the end. It's the making of whatever's going on, because I already know that what we do is going to be, it'll be good, or it could be great, or maybe miraculously we'll make something that's for the ages. But I know that my efforts will not be in vain. I already know that. So I don't need people to pat me on the back. What I need is the chance to go work with other people and create. And hopefully we can just create more and more good stuff, and people can look back and go, hey, well, he never got to make an Academy Award winning movie, but I can see that he took movies that weren't that good, but made him better. And if that's my legacy, that's okay.
We're kindred spirits that way, Rob, because I lost my last radio job because of COVID, and I knew it was just business. It wasn't personal. But, you know, being a late middle-aged man, a white guy, is not an easy thing. So thankfully I've got Word Balloon, and this is my legacy, and it's okay. And I've got you, and I know you have friends that have had tremendous success in television and film, as have I in broadcasting and stuff. And God bless them. I have no jealousy or envy.
No,
you got to run your own race. But like you, exactly. It's like, well, I'm going to keep making my stuff, and if I never get another broadcast job, it's okay, because I am feeding my creativity just as you are. I want you. We're going to get to a project you're working on with Max Allen Collins in a second.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, because people would say, well, Rob, if I could be your mocking voice, gee, Rob, all you made was Free Enterprise.
I know.
What have you done for me lately? And you've done a lot. And also, by the way, I'll even give it up to you for those episodes of, what was the noir Cinemax show?
Oh, Femme Fatales.
Femme Fatales, man. Come on. Silly show. May not, I don't even know if they make that show these days.
No,
Probably
no,
not.
I mean, they would never, we can't even admit we worked on it these days.
There you go. But in the ensuing years, Tango Shalom, obviously a movie that you were very deeply involved with.
Yeah, and White Devils, which I'm doing now.
White Devils, Hills Run Red.
Yeah,
you went back to, and just did the.
We were nominated for a Rondo Hatton Award for Best Special Features in 2020. Which, by the way, like you, when COVID first happened, I'm like, well, what are we going to do? And Scream Factory said, we're putting out the movie you produced on Blu-ray. And I said, really? And I went back to all the footage I'd shot 12 years before that I never was able to use, all the interviews with the cast, and I had nothing to do. So I was broadcasting on YouTube and cutting these special features with Dave Parker, the director. He was doing new stuff, and I was going back to all my footage that I shot in Bulgaria, and the funny thing is, you don't talk about what you did 15 years ago. Like, I'm not one of those people, well, I made this. I'm always like making something new.
Sure.
But it was wild to be able to go back, and when Scream Factory put out The Hills Run Red on Blu-ray in 2020, to go back and look at this footage that I shot from 12 years ago. And it made me realize, like, we got this movie produced at Warner Brothers with Joel Silver, who made Die Hard and Predator and Lethal Weapon. He was our executive producer. And to me, it was a $350,000 movie that we turned into a Warner Brothers film.
Wow.
That we made with Joel Silver. Like, for me personally, that was an epic win. Like, as far as my career in movies and stuff, nobody would know that. No, because the movie is just a $4 million direct-to-video movie, but whatever. For me personally, I look back at that movie, and the fact that Scream Factory, who I love, great company that's releasing all these great classic horror films, wanted to put it out on Blu-ray and said to us, guys, whatever you give us, we'll put everything you make on the disc. We made like 10 hours of special features. It's the most self-indulgent DVD or Blu-ray package ever. It's totally self-indulgent. I mean, I literally, somebody interviewed me on the set that I had it was my camera. I literally made a piece, talk about the height of narcissism. I literally made a piece about myself. I took this interview and cut, and I'm like, why not? And I put in the credits of that piece, I said, like, written, produced, and directed by me. I actually put that in the end credits just because I thought that was hilarious.
Sure.
But it was a celebration of everybody that Antonio Rubino, the production designer, recently passed away, and I did a piece about him that I'm happy is on that disc. But why not? Nobody will ever know. Like, nobody will ever give me any credit. These days, people are like, if you didn't make Dune 2 or you didn't make Oppenheimer, you haven't really done anything.
God, I mean, it's, forgive the comparison, but everyone is quick to shit on Ed Wood for Plan 9 for Outer Space, and it's like, Yeah, Ed Wood made like 4 or 5 movies. How many movies did you make?
Well,
And
yeah.
so to the average armchair critic and stuff. By the way, I want to point out on Sundays, Rob does an incredible show. Let's Get Physical Media with this great guy from Germany, Dieter Bastian.
Dieter Bastian, yep.
Yeah, and my God, it is so. And thank God, because truly, much like vinyl, if people aren't aware, physical media, as we see the various streamers yank movies, whether they're licensing them to other streamers or for whatever reason, you can't count on them to keep the movies we love and the television shows we love. You got to buy physical media. And Rob and Dieter are there every Sunday pointing out all the new releases and the great companies that are thankfully taking these cult movies and putting them out there for us.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because the project that I'm working on now is a direct result of this YouTube show. Because the person who watched it, well, not the person, but a person, was Max Allen Collins. So my business partner, who lives in Iowa, in the Quad Cities, Mike Bodden, was friends with Max Allen Collins. And last August of 2023, like they were all having lunch together. And somehow my name came, Mike mentioned, or Max might have mentioned to Mike, I heard you know Rob Burnett. And while they were at lunch, this is a true story, I happened to call Mike on the phone. And I get on the phone with Max Allen Collins. Of course, I read Max did a run of Batman in the 80s, the Batman comics. And I was like, obviously you wrote the graphic novel that Road to Perdition was based on. And I knew that he took over Dick Tracy from Chester Gould. An amazing story. And he's telling me he's a big fan of mine. Like I'm on the phone with him going, I didn't know much about him. And I was like, we should do something together. So at first I was like, well, maybe we could do Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer but then Skydance, that might buy Paramount, is doing a Mike Hammer movie that Max is an executive producer on.
Oh, that's great to hear. Wonderful.
Yeah. And so Max goes, well, I've written this 19 novel series about this character named Nathan Heller, and the new book comes out October, which was October 2023. The last book, Too Many Bullets, came out.
Yep.
And I'm like, and for whatever reason, we started talking about doing audio dramas. And I said, well, they're doing some incredible stuff. I brought up the Neil Gaiman Sandman audio drama, which is just it's amazing.
Fantastic.
And I grew up listening to CBS Radio Mystery Theater, and so I figured, well, why don't we do that? And I'd been covering Star Trek Picard season 3. I'd become friendly with Terry Matalas. He introduced me to Todd Stashwick, and I love Todd Stashwick, and I called up Todd, and who I didn't know before. So I met Terry, and then he introduced me to Todd. He'd been on my show. I said, yo, man, you're cool, dude. How would you feel like playing a 1930s detective? And I was thinking this because it takes place in Chicago. The first book is called True Detective, and it's set with the backdrop of the 1933 World's Fair, and it deals with the assassination of Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, which was really interesting because maybe the Italian assassin was trying to kill FDR, but accidentally missed and killed Anton Cermak. So Max's stories about this fictional detective, which span from the 1930s to the 1960s.
Yes.
And the whole point is, like the Woody Allen movie Zelig, he's involved in all these actual historical events with real historical figures.
Yes.
And I was like, that's so dope, dude. We should do. And for whatever reason, and he goes, well, I told him, I go, we're going to crowdfund it. And then we actually, so it's interesting. We have some of the money to make this, but because I'm ambitious, I mean, more so than I'm like, well, we don't have enough. So because I want to get A-list actors, I'm like, what if we could get Stanley Tucci to come back and play Frank Nitti the way he did in Road to Perdition? I love Stanley Tucci, but we'd have to get the money to do it. And what if we did like a special edition vinyl box set, and I'll get a composer to write brand new music, which Alexander Bornstein did. I met him on Axonar 10 years ago. And so we've been working together on and off, and it'll be 11 volumes. It'll be 11 vinyl records, 10 records with each episode of the show, and 1 soundtrack record. So we're putting together the crowdfunding campaign. We took Stashwick. There it is. True Noir is what it's called. True Noir, the Nathan Heller case books. That is our we call our movie poster. That is the movie poster for the audio drama. And again, I'll tell you how this movie poster came about, which I'm over the moon with. A guy named Bartos contacted me, watches my show. He goes, look, I live in Romania. And he sent me some of his movie poster work for movies we all know and love. He's amazing. I mean, you can see right here. He's an amazing artist. He goes, I want to do anything I can for you. I'm like, well, we have this audio drama, but I want it to be like a movie. And so that's it. And then I said to Max, I go, we can't crowdfund something that we haven't heard before. Like, people don't understand, what does an immersive audio drama mean? And it's mixed in 5.1. I'm like, I've been telling people it's like a movie, but there's no pictures.
It's a movie in your mind.
It's a movie in your mind, a theater of the mind. And I said, I want the premiere. We're going to have a red carpet premiere at the movie theater, and you're going to come into the auditorium, and then we're going to turn off all the lights. And nothing is going to play on the screen, and you're just going to hear it in the
surround sound 5.1, yeah.
And
no, I agree with that. Yeah.
And we took Stashwick and to Chicago. He is a veteran of Second City, and we went to his apartment that he was living in when he was a struggling actor in the 90s. And this is the coolest thing. So we didn't call anybody. Like, Second City is a theater; it's closed. You can't just like walk in there. But we went there and we're like taking pictures with him out of there. And then we walk inside and we can go up the stairs. And while we're going up the stairs, his mentor that he worked with 30 years ago is coming down the stairs going, oh my God.
Oh, that's great.
We just happen to be there. And so they take us in where she's teaching a class, the young generation on the main stage. The students are there. We go on to the main stage at Second City, and she brings Todd in, and he starts talking and we're filming the whole thing. You'll see some of this in the Kickstarter campaign.
That's great.
I'm like getting chills.
Yeah.
So
happy accident, man. Orson Welles. It's
unbelievable.
That kind of thing, man.
And
it's wonderful. Keep going. Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. It's going to be a 10 episode, probably 8-hour series. It's going to be fully immersive, and we're going to be kickstarting it and raising the money to, as I said, we've got like half the money, but it's funny because you realize that I call it our digital backlot. We're creating these audio environments, and they have to be fully immersive. It's mixed like it's a movie. So when you hear bullets are whizzing around you and everything, and when the Kickstarter campaign goes live, you can download it. We have a 2-channel stereo mix and a 5.1 mix. We did a 12-minute proof of concept.
Sure.
Just a brief little snippet so you could hear what it is. Because I'm like, we can't ask people.
You can't just describe it. You have to show it. But you're right, man. Well, it's funny, Rob. National Public Radio, special shows like This American Life,
which I love.
They do a great job. And, you always talk about verisimilitude. I always, cinema verite. Well, I always say audio verite. And that you really do try to get immersive with the natural sounds you would hear if you were at the place. And a show like This American Life does it all the time. And that's why, as you say, right now, as you were telling Max, what they're doing with audio drama is incredible. Not just audible, certainly. And in fact, the Vasek points out that there's an audio adaptation of The Adventures of Luther Arkwright with David Tennant. I know, now I'm blanking, Mad TV. Phil Lamar. The Enterprise, of course. Yeah. He did a great Moriarty where he plays a very sadistic Sherlock Holmes, and Moriarty's the hero. And it's, Victorian London and stuff. Full sound effects, great score behind it.
Yep.
No, I mean, and again, like you, not only CBS Radio Mystery Theater, but those decades of old-time radio. I'm a sucker for all that.
The Shadow Knows and all.
The Shadow, sure. Gunsmoke from the 50s, right as TV is coming in, is one of the greatest audio-produced dramas. And it sounds like somebody had an open microphone in 1888 and was following Matt Dillon in Dodge City, and it sounds ridiculously authentic.
No,
and
it's amazing.
unfortunately, TV came in. You know.
Well, what's funny in our modern age, you know, when people are going to the gym or they're going to work or they're in their cars, they're commuting, they'll listen to audio dramas. They'll walk their dogs. So I'm hoping, like, I don't know if I don't know if it's gonna be successful. You know, you never know.
Well, there's an audience, Rob. It's a question of you getting that audience aware, and that's why when the Kickstarter campaign starts, of course, you're welcome back.
Yeah, well, it's going to start in a week. It's going to start in it's going to start in like a week.
All right, maybe a couple weeks into it. I mean, you know, Rob, as evidenced in the 2 hours that we've already been talking, we always got shit to talk about. And seriously, you're a champ for staying up with me and doing this.
I feel like keeping you up. I'm keeping you up.
No. Again, Bennis and I will do a 3-hour conversation that starts at midnight my time. So
that's good. Okay, then. I mean, you and I have always talked forever. Long conversation. It's funny because talking to you, it's wild to me that I've been on YouTube this month. As a matter of fact, I didn't realize this, but now I'm just realizing this again. I got to find out the exact date. April is my YouTube anniversary. And I first went on YouTube. I was on the 6th episode of AMC Heroes with John Schnepp and John Campia, whose show I'm on tomorrow. So we have been streaming for 9 years.
That's great.
Which is insane to me. And again, Robservations is going to hit next month 1,000 episodes, which is also crazy. And you think about, like you were talking about, a legacy. You know, work is work. You know, whatever you do the work, and if I have to say that I've been mainlining cartoonist kayfabe since Ed's death.
Yeah.
And I've been going back, and boy, do I forget how great that show is when they have guests on and they do deep dives into the work. I mean, discussions of each panel, and it's such cartoonist kayfabe is such a great show. The funny thing is I wouldn't watch it regularly. I'd only watch it if it's something I was really interested in. Today, for instance, I watched them. There was a show about X-Men 1, which is the biggest selling comic book of all time that Jim Lee drew. It's when they spun off Uncanny into X-Men 1
in the 90s. Absolutely. Yeah.
And with the great 4-panel triptych cover. And it just popped up in my feed because I've been watching a lot of cartoonist kayfabe, and I was like, oh, I got to watch that. Because, you know, I bought that off the rack, and what a great, those guys are so great. And yesterday I watched an episode about X-Men, the 5th issue of that series with Omega Red, and they just tore it apart, and it was hilarious because they know and they love comics so much that to go and watch them, and the way they bring on these creators, and go back and watch Rob Liefeld's recent appearance on that show, and he gave this really heartfelt. I love Rob Liefeld, and for people that don't know, you know, he had a Wizard column called Robservations that I totally forgot about. There's other people that have had shows called Robservations, and when I started, I thought that Rob was done with Robservations, so I was like, oh, I guess I can do a new Robservations. But Rob Liefeld is one of my favorite comic creators that I've met. I was at the Playboy party at Comic-Con, I don't know, 10 years ago maybe. And I was talking to him, and I got to ask him something I've always wanted to ask him. And in 1994, 30 years ago, at Comic-Con was the big year that Image Comics, they took over Comic-Con like if they were Zeppelin conquering America, the Beatles or something. And all the 5 founders of Image, I mean, they were like the conquering heroes. Spawn, everybody, they were making millions of dollars a month. And Rob Liefeld built a 1-to-1 scale Youngblood spaceship. And I asked him at this party, I was like, dude, how did you come to do this? And if you've ever watched Rob Liefeld talk, he's very animated, and yes. He was so. And he goes, listen, man. Here's the problem with building a 1-to-1 scale spaceship. You never think how you're going to get it somewhere and how you're going to get it back. And I don't think I've ever laughed as much in my life as he told me the travails of having this thing built, bringing it to Comic-Con, and figuring out how he was going to get it out.
Yeah,
and I was just dying. I was there with my date with Adrian, this girl Adrian Biddle, and we were howling. We were howling with laughter.
Yeah, he's the best.
And I mean, and he too is. Oh my God! But that story that because he's, he was like 20 when he had huge success at Marvel, and I just watched another when he was talking about doing X-Force or X-Men, or pardon me, New Mutants 98. Or not, no, New Mutants 96 leading up to the 100th episode or 100th issue of New Mutants, and then it became X-Force. I mean, go watch Cartoonist Kayfabe. It's so great. And they've talked. I was watching a Brian Boland episode earlier today. And I mean, Brian Boland, Camelot 3000, man.
Yes.
Even before Killing Joke.
Rugg and Pisker had that, and Rugg still has it, that artist perspective. And I want more great, I'd forgive my putting myself with these guys, but I want more great interview shows like the show I attempt to do, because I want to listen to stuff. And their show is great that way. They have this great granular forensic look at comics and things like Wizard Magazine, when they go page by page of what was in a Wizard Magazine. No, it's a great show, and it breaks my heart that I don't know what Jim's going to do moving forward. I really don't know.
Well, the way they would break down, like the way, because they know so much, because Pisker was I think he was a tremendous talent, and so is Jim Rugg. Both of them are. But
Jimmy's amazing as well, absolutely.
And when they talk about comics, the way they're pointing out like how something was inked, or they know so much. They're so immersed that to watch the two of them interact and just talk about a panel, you learn more about the art of comics. And the thing is, they're both populists and indie guys. Yes. So they'll sit there and they'll do a whole show on Omega Red fighting Wolverine, and they'll be like, "This comic's terrible," and they'll tell you why. But they're like, "But I read it 6 times,"
right?
Whatever. Right. And they're just, they are the best. Those guys, and Ed was,
one of a kind guy. I mean, really, he's been on my mind all week. And I had him on Word Balloon several times, and I just appreciated his professional perspective on the way he approached comics, and a very singular voice in the best ways. And again, it's a less of a comic world without him. And it's weird, Rob, because I think of Little Abner, creator of Little Abner. Damn it. Tip of my tongue. I know I'll think of
Max Allen Collins would hate me for not knowing this.
Well, shame on both of us for not remembering. But this guy was a predator,
right?
And was exposed. Dennis Kitchen did Al Cap.
Al Cap.
Dennis Kitchen co-wrote this incredible biography of Al Cap, warts and all. When they discovered he was going to colleges, because this guy, for people who don't know and likely have heard of Little Abner, Al Cap was Charles Schultz with a demonstrative personality. He was happy to be on your talk show. There's an amazing Dick Cavett did in the early 70s when he was challenging Ted Kennedy to run for Senate and everything. Glib, funny, fast. There's a great scene when John and Yoko were doing their bed-in, and Al Cap was yelling at them as an old man, yelling at clouds, and didn't get it. Al Cap went from being this very progressive liberal. The free love in 60s really turned him off, the hippie movement, and he became a conservative in response. Well, then when it was discovered that he was going to college campuses, there are albums of him giving his college lectures and challenging the hippie audience to have an open debate with him and stuff. Well, he would get, if they had a woman from the school newspaper to write an article, he'd try to have sex with him.
Right.
And it got reported. And of all people, Britt Hume was the leg man, investigative reporter for a DC columnist. And the DC columnist, in that sort of old-fashioned way, is like, well, we need to hear Al Cap's side of the story. And Britt Hume's like, no, we have to report this. This is happening. There are student police reports against Al Cap. And it ruined him, because it did become public. and everything evaporated. Everything went away. Now, the only reason why I bring that up is, okay, well, again, Al Kep was a physical predator.
Yeah, that's what we're missing. I mean,
right. Ed
it
Pittsburgh did not deserve the
No.
same treatment and never got a chance until his suicide note to give his side of the story.
Yeah,
and that's lousy. That's really, really lousy.
Well, the thing is, I also think that when you watch cartoonist kayfabe, you really do get a sense of who and what he was as a person. And then, I mean, I really do think, as I said, Hip Hop Family Tree is one of the great works of comic art of the 21st century, because here was a guy who, he'll tell you this himself, he grew up in a mostly black neighborhood. His Hip Hop Family Tree is a document on the whole history of hip hop, a culture that he was surrounded by, but he was never a part of. He could never be a part of it. And it is such a celebration. It is such a testament about how one artist in one medium could look at other artists, talk about, I mean, if there's something in this, the Star Trek ethos in his desire to do Hip Hop Family Tree, and you get the hardcover omnibus. It's great. That omnibus is great. That work alone, and somebody, like I said, I got called out. Is he really a legend? For that alone, he is. And then, of course, because of that, Marvel said, he did X-Men Grand Design, where he contextualized the entire crazy history of the X-Men into, I mean, unbelievable.
Yep.
Unbelievable. And you can kind of see here, I have a whole, I calculated, it's like $6,000 worth of X-Men omnibuses. I got sick of, I've gotten rid of all my flippers. I just want omnibuses. Give me omnibuses. I'm not going to collect individual books. Although I did go and get the Hellfire Gala 2023 because it was totally awesome. But yes, I will still go to the comic book store. But I love omnibuses. Give me absolute editions. Give me omnibuses. I just got Howard Chaykin's Times Squared omnibus where he finishes the story. Oh my God, is that it is so good.
Love Howard.
I love Howard Chaykin. I love American Flag. I love Times
Square.
Hey
man, I'm gonna claim credit because we did one of those online conventions during COVID, and I'm like, we gotta let Rob interview Howard. I interview Howard all the time. Let Rob talk.
You did. It was amazing. I mean, I had so much fun interviewing Howard Chaykin, and I can't, it's so funny to me because of all the comic artists in the world, his American Flag was probably the most influential comic book ever in my life, because to me, it's the most cinematic comic ever. I mean, you could say, like, well, The Authority is very cinematic. It's very widescreen. And I love the first 12 issues of The Authority. It's great. But in terms of Ken Brusenak's lettering and I mean, oh my God, American Flag changed my life. I literally did. I picked it up and I'm like, what is this? And I'm opening up going, oh my God.
I was the same way, man, in the 80s. Absolutely. And again, because listen, Howard gets maligned all the time because Howard is not afraid of gender sports.
He made a look at Black Kiss.
Black Kiss, absolutely, man. And Howard's defense is, I'm a smutty guy. I like smut, and I love that Howard. And I understand.
Well, he talks about the trans community and all that. I mean, he was all part of that. New York.
And again, unfortunately, the extreme left doesn't know what to make of Howard because Shades of Gray escapes the extreme left.
Well, the modern left.
Yes,
you know why?
The extreme right as well. Go ahead.
I have a theory about this.
Please.
The modern left has not lived. They only exist in a theoretical space. They've never actually been in the situations. Everything is offensive to them. Everything is. So when you see people, you see somebody go in and say, this person misgendered me. I'm like, are you kidding me? how do you think how is the world supposed to know who you are? No one knows fuck all about you. They don't know you. And you're mad because somebody misgendered you? How are you? No. You don't get to be mad at the world. You need to make sure that your responsibility is to make sure that the world knows you
and understands you. Yeah.
The world, and it's so weird. It's such
it won't come from outside. It has to come from you.
That's and
very gently. I mean, I'd rather you call me they, and the problem solved.
Problem solved. Okay, but the thing is, everybody gets indignant about it. Like, I don't think I grew up like I was a pretty little twink. I mean, I had lots of gay friends when I was 13, 14, 15 in the Seattle arts community. No one hassled me. I understood they were gay. I didn't have a problem. I went to gay clubs. I got booze when I was like 16 years old. It was great. Did I have a problem? No. Were there predators after me? No. I had a great time. I have friends from that era that are still my friends. One of my very dearest, oldest friends in the world used to take me to go to the University of Washington men's gymnastics team tryouts. And he was substantially older than I was. Like by maybe almost 20 years. He never came out to me. And I'm like, when he finally did, we'd known each other for like 20 years. He goes, you know, I'm gay. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Maybe the tryouts of the University of Washington men's gymnastics team, maybe that tipped me off when I was in college. And we became friends because I looked like I was a twink. I mean, I was frosted tips. I'm pinning my jeans. I mean, I'm like, come on, man. It's all good. You never came on to me. You never did anything untoward. We loved movies. That's what bonded us. Think I didn't know you were gay? You know, it's such a funny thing. It's so weird. And nowadays, people, like, they're waiting to be offended. And I'm
Correct.
like, the world is a messy place.
Right.
If you're online, you know, no one wants to assume responsibility either. Like it takes two to tango. If you don't like what somebody's doing online, block them, turn them off.
Yeah,
that's it. And don't sit on emails that you were uncomfortable with, and then 4 years later decide to come out because, hey, you'll curry favor with I don't know who, and pillory somebody's reputation because you encourage a conversation that never went anywhere. But other people are saying things, and what are you going to do? Get juiced up because of now? Because people will give you likes or say, yes, that's. I mean, people have forgotten to live. We're behind these screens all the time. No one is going. The world is messy. I've been in some really sketchy situations a lot in my life. I would not give up any one of them because I learned a lot. I was in, I mean, I could write a book called Sketchathon and talk about all these weird compromising situations that I either witnessed, I got people out of. I mean, I've seen it all. And because that's what human beings are like. That's what the world is. You have to go out. No one today has lived. They're behind their screens. They're on their phones. And when real life comes knocking on their door, they're either going to use it to curry favor back on the screens. They're not going to go live. They're not going to go outside and take that knowledge and go out and have an experience. They're not going to boldly go. They're going to sit behind and wait to have people go, oh, like. And they don't know anything. Let's go to be a Marxist. Great. That's what we need. Go be a Marxist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at. That's where we're at.
I don't know what the solution is, but you're right, and it's a cruel world. And,
but the thing is, here's the thing: the world is a great place, despite all the horrors that are visited upon people every day. The world is a great place, but it takes people to go out into the world, to boldly go, and to stand in front of others, face to face, and have conversations. Sit down and have a meal. Learn to converse with people that you might not agree with, but don't go scream and yell and bitch. Oh, this person's coming to my college campus. No. You need to sit down with those people and talk to them person to person, Find out what they believe. If you don't like what they say, don't be accusatory. Ask them, how did you come to believe this?
Right.
The problem with our modern day is people are chicken shits. They're not going out into the world and living life. They're sitting in their safe spaces, and they're on their computers, pillaring other people that they know nothing about. You have to live. You have to go out into the world. You have to stand toe to toe, face to face, eye to eye with people. You have to engage. And if you don't do that, you are part of the problem.
Right. Absolutely. No, we have to listen, man. We have to find a way to reach common ground and get along. And it's sad when there have been examples on the right that I think started before the social media explosion. And compromise to the right became, no, you lose when you compromise.
Well,
but now the extreme modern left has adopted a similar tone of,
terrible.
I can't talk to that person because they don't agree with me. And it's like, well, we all live here, man. We all got to find a way of getting along and moving things forward and accept the fact that there might be a different point of view. But also make them understand where you're coming from. Nobody deserves to be disrespected. So by all means, defend yourself. But don't go into something, as you say, where you're kind of looking to be insulted. And I'm just waiting for them to use the wrong pronoun and forgive the generality. But essentially, that seems to be the tone. And it's like, you got it. And also the generation gap, which has always been a problem. You know, the hippies weren't understood by the World War II era and subsequent generations after that. And it's like, you got to understand there might be people that are extreme senior citizens that only see one person. And when they say, well, I'd prefer to be called they don't get it.
No,
So just be patient with them and try to explain where you're coming from.
The hippies never watched a platoon of their friends destroyed in front of them. You know, and you can't expect, so you have a 20-year gap. World War II ends in 1945. And in 1965, the Beatles were coming, or 64, the Beatles are coming to America and appearing on Ed Sullivan. And with that, like, I'm friends with people that are in their 20s, actually teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. We're all different. We all had different experiences, you know, and I can't expect modern fans to know what it was like to live in a world where Star Wars didn't exist. And I can't, if you're a science fiction, fantasy, and horror fan, and you're a movie fan, and I was 10 years old, and to sit in the UA 150 theater, that gigantic theater on the corner of 6th and Blanchard, when Star Wars, opening weekend of Star Wars, humanity had never seen anything like this. There had never been a vision on a screen. There is nothing analogous in all of human history. I know I'm being hyperbolic, but I'm also being truthful.
You're being truthful, absolutely.
No one had seen it. And to watch Star Wars in a movie theater in 1977, the weekend of May 25th, or the weekend after that, was to have your experience of existence changed.
Correct.
Because your imagination was expanded by what was possible by what George Lucas, his collaborators, Gary Kurtz, Marshall Lucas, all of ILM, all of the actors, what came across screens in that time made our minds and our imaginations bigger.
Yeah.
And it has happened. Jurassic Park, photorealistic dinosaurs, same kind of thing. The Matrix, which last Sunday celebrated its 25th anniversary. We have seen these watershed moments. The 80s were full of them. Comics especially. We saw watershed moments in comic books year after year after year. American Flag was one. Frank Miller's Ronin. You know, then of course the Dark Knight Rises and all Watchmen and Crisis on Infinite Earths and all that stuff. We got to watch the independent comics explosion. Cerebus, you know, all of the things that we got to see.
Yeah.
They'd never existed before. And it broadened our imaginative horizons. Now, not so much. You know, video games are doing it. I think video games are pushing. That's why I'm always saying that cinema was the art form of the 20th century. I think video games are the art form of the 21st. They're going to push, and we're not even there yet.
No.
We're like where video games are now. I mean, it's not fair to say because we're 50 years into video games if you go back to Pong, but we're going to see things with AI and Unreal Engine and stuff that's going to be able to be made on the fly, and with what Apple's doing with their Apple Pro Vision Pro, there's going to be stuff that we're going to see in the next 5 or 10 years. It's going to be insane.
Yeah,
you're going to be able to craft a video game in real time on the fly. Like, I'm here, and you're going to be able to make it up on the fly, and AI and prompts and Unreal Engine and all that.
Yeah.
You'll be able to at the speed of thought, you'll be able to have images in front of you. People are going to be able to create their own feature films overnight.
Yeah.
We're going to see all that. What that's going to do to humanity, I don't quite know, but it's going to be amazing. I mean, it's going to be make us more narcissistic. Although when we start trading our visions, it's going to be interesting. And I'm excited, to be honest. I'm excited to see where it all goes. I mean, I think movies are going to die. I think that in a way, I mean, people always
at least
love
be minimized. Yeah, they'll be minimized as far as entertainment.
Yeah. But when can you imagine meeting a significant other and instead of saying I'm going to make you a mixtape, you can say I dreamt about you last night, and you can give that significant other the dream that you had,
like a mixtape. Yeah.
The dream about and whatever we're 5 years away, probably less, from being able to do that. I made a movie about you last night, a 2-hour feature film about you and I. Here it is.
Sure.
And that's where we're going to go. That's where the possibilities where we're at, it's so insane where we're going to go. The real question is, can we stop killing ourselves as always and not blow up the planet? Because we're getting, if Iran attacks Israel tomorrow, who knows?
No, I hear you, buddy. Absolutely. We could stop there if you'd like.
Yeah, man.
Again, I do want to briefly mention, because again, one of the great things that I do with Rob is I find old movies of the week on YouTube or old TV shows, and I'm like, by the way, I like Otherworld from the 80s, and
Jonathan Banks. Jonathan Banks is in Otherworld.
Yes, he is. And what's her name? Who was on the Rockford Files all the time? She's the mom.
Oh yeah, what is her name?
I forget her name, but yeah, she's fantastic. And she's in the Columbo with Robert Conrad, and she's Robert Conrad's hot secretary.
Yep.
And she's fantastic, and I love that she's in Otherworld. But one I was watching just a couple of weeks ago, and I'm so glad that people uploaded it on YouTube. Salvage 1.
Oh my God! And the first TV movie.
The pilot is amazing.
Amazing.
The pilot movie's fantastic, and it's so 70s special effects. But if everybody doesn't know it, you might remember the Billy Bob Thornton movie, The Astronaut Farmer, where he builds his own spaceship and he orbits and stuff. Well, Andy Griffith owns a junkyard, and he starts salvaging old rocket parts, and he builds his own rocket because he wants to go to the moon and grab everything that NASA left on the moon.
Right. Yep.
Bring it back and sell it. And it's a great movie. It's a great TV movie. It's audacious. The father from Silver Spoons is the astronaut that he employs. It's a very silly, fun movie. And the TV series was mostly miss and not hit. But, it survived for a season and a half. And, yeah, I was dying watching it. And I'm like, and the next time I talk to Rob, I got to bring up Salvage 1.
I loved Salvage 1. Loved it. It was so, that and Quark.
I love Quark, and there's that half season.
Richard Benjamin.
Yeah, it's
a space garbage man.
Yeah, and it's like totally a Star Trek parody in the late 70s. Tim Thomerson as a transgender character that's half man, half woman.
And that's another thing. People forget this stuff it's not new. The world's been dealing with this stuff for a long time, and it's just, I wish. There's so much great stuff that has already been, and nowadays modern, like when I was a kid, I loved Our Gang shorts from the 1930s. I would watch all pop culture. Nowadays, there's this really weird inclination amongst youth to not music they're into. And there's a lot of reaction channels that I like I'm totally in love. I'm totally in love from afar with the girl that does popcorn in bed. You know, she's got a great. I watched
I'll check it out.
Popcorn in Bed. She's great, and I'm like, it's so funny because the nerd world, we have nerd goddess girls everywhere. We didn't have that when I was getting older, and you and I were younger kids. We didn't have
Very
nerd
true.
girls.
Very
Now they're
true.
nerd goddesses on every street corner. It's amazing.
Absolutely,
Like,
man. Well, and
and yet,
that's why I love Comic-Con, because the women are there and they love what we love. And it's like, that's fantastic, man. Go, kids.
that was not the truth when we were younger.
No. No,
It was all me and old dudes rifling through long boxes. No, that's what it was.
I hear you,
You know,
man.
I'm
No,
looking for Tales
absolutely.
to Astonish number whatever.
I
Here
remember
it is.
I remember being at a convention like 12 years ago, at least, if not more. And I was sitting in a panel waiting for it to start. And this girl, like 14 years old, and she was just hyperventilating. She's like, I'm so sorry. This is my first convention. And I'm sure you think I'm crazy. I'm like, no, I get it. I go, that's great. I said, enjoy every minute. You'll be fine. And I kept my distance. And it's like, that's fine. Good for you. I don't like,
Oh yeah, you got to do it.
that's terrific, man. Well,
By
that's
the way,
the thing.
Matt Tween in the chat says happy birthday. Matt Tween, you're a very funny man.
Oh, that's awesome. Exactly. And there were a couple others that did it as well. Yes.
Here's the thing. Somehow, and I still don't quite understand, people started wishing me happy birthday on my show. It's not my birthday. My birthday is May 15th, and then it's stuck. Everywhere I've gone, even when I'm on John Campia's show, when I go to anybody else's show, whenever they find me and they wish me happy birthday, it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious.
There are worse things in the world to mistake. So that's terrific, man. No, I love it. I'll remind you. Well, listen, and again, if it is too soon for you to come back, maybe we'll get Max on to talk about True Noir.
Oh, yeah. You know what? By the way,
Or the two of you.
Max is an incredible raconteur. I love listening to Max talk, and he has one of the greatest stories. I'll tell the story. So, when Max Allan Collins was 8 years old, he wrote to Chester Gould, who was the creator of Dick Tracy. He wrote to Chester Gould about Dick Tracy, and Chester Gould wrote him back and drew a picture of Dick Tracy and sent it back to him. He has this in his house. In Max's house, he has one of the greatest collections of original newspaper comic strip art. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. But he has the picture, that Chester Gould, and he took over writing the Dick Tracy comic from Chester Gould for the Tribune, the Chicago Trib.
Yes, he did.
That's like the greatest fan story ever.
You know, among my first 4 episodes of Word Balloon, Max Collins was one of my first guests.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, I've been, and I talked to him last year at the beginning of the year, and we talked Mike Hammer stuff and everything. And no, in fact, when you had him on announcing the Nate Heller project and everything, I popped in and I said something.
Oh,
and
yeah,
you were
yeah.
very nice. You promoted Word Balloon, and he's like, "Oh, I know John," and I'm like, "Oh, that's great, good." And I don't know. I hope to God, and you don't have to reveal anything now, but I hope I'm not Kathy Bates with him. I don't think I am.
No,
I mean,
no. He is one of the nicest men I've ever met, and he's such a talent and such a fan. I didn't even, in his house, he said, well, you haven't even seen the basement yet. I was like, well, I hope it's not like the guy in Silence of the Lambs. But no, he has such an incredible collection. And again, because he loves this stuff. I mean,
yeah.
he has, this is the best. He has the actual original painting of the one sheet art for the Two Jakes, the sequel to Chinatown that Jack Nicholson himself directed. And it was funny. I'm up in his office, up in the top of his house, and I turn and I'm like, is that the original art for the Two Jakes? And he loved the fact that I knew what that was. But
sure.
I'm like, I can't believe I've met a kindred spirit that would have something like that. And what was interesting was, the funny thing for me about this, nobody's going to care about this, but I worked in an ad agency, a broadcast ad agency, where I did commercials. And their in-house artist, an old man, he was really old. He painted the Chinatown one sheet, the artwork, and he had the actual art, and his name's actually on the poster. And I couldn't believe, because he was very flamboyant, and he had this white hair, and he never stopped smoking. And from a different era. And I'm like, oh my God, dude. And I revered him. He was an artist. It's not like he like was partying at the Derby in like the 30s or something. He's like, well, I painted this and I painted that. I'm like, that's amazing. And you get excited about different things. But when I saw that too, Jakes, Max Allen Collins is the real deal.
100%.
He's the real deal.
Literally a couple hours ago, I was talking to my buddy Alex Segura, who is writing a Dick Tracy comic book for Mad Cave that comes out in a couple of weeks. And he showed me the first issue. It looks amazing. And we were talking about Max. And he said, got not only the Beatty movie, but Max's novelization of the movie really blew him away. And I'm like, it's not just a novelization. Max expands in the book and did that for a lot of the novelizations he made for the decades that he's been doing it. And he's done, if not 100 more, just around 100 novelizations, if not more. And he's brilliant at it. He really is.
He's an incredible guy. An incredible guy.
And that's on top of his novels, his regular novels. No, he's incredibly prolific. The Nate Heller stuff is amazing. And I've read several of those and I always enjoy them. I read his Elliot Ness novels that he wrote as well in the 80s. I've been along, and like you said, his Batman run, Ms. Tree, we didn't even mention.
Well, we didn't talk about. I'll tell you something. I sent Ms. Tree to a pretty powerful Hollywood producer, and they liked it. And look, I'll tell you, the reason that I want to do these Nate Heller audio dramas, they're starting in the 30s. So I want to do the 30s and 40s because I'm teeing up the idea that I want to do the Nathan Heller TV series starring Todd Stashwick in the 50s.
That would be great.
That's the whole thing.
Wow.
Stashwick. That's the goal. I mean, and the thing is, everybody has to know. I mean, there's 19 novels, and we're going to make these audio dramas that are going to be 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours long. And you're going to know, you'll be able to be like, it's a season of TV. Here it is. Let's do it. Why not? And talk about an IP, 19 novels, and Stashwick. Todd Stashwick is a total geek, and you got to get into his whole prog core and D&D thing. I mean, we had a conversation about Styx's album, The Grand Illusion, how it's prog rock. Yeah, he has a thing called he has defined. Todd Stashwick has defined. He said someone else came up with this, but he talks about prog core. You need to get him on your show. I'm going to tell him he's got to come on your show. You've got to talk to him about progcore because he's going to launch his own Kickstarter to do this progcore thing. It's amazing. His quest to bring progcore to the masses. I'm all behind it.
Well,
and he's like Rankin and Bass's Hobbit is progcore.
Oh, interesting.
So Krull, the movie Krull, is progcore.
I love it.
Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great thinking. I met him at Fan Expo Chicago last summer, and he, he talked. I've heard him in interviews talk about being in Chicago and in the '90s and stuff. So he knows the radio stations I worked at. He didn't know me, and he didn't need to know me. And I explained to him. I said, I worked at the rock station XRT. Oh, wow. And I said, I worked at the Score, the sports station. Oh, I know the Score. I'm like, well, that's what I'm telling you, man. I go, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your work. And and I don't think at the time you guys had announced the Nate Heller project and stuff. No, I would love to have him on. So yeah, that'd be great if you would put in a word because I know he's one of us clearly.
Oh no, he has his nerd. I say nerd cave. He's like, no, it's the nerd lair. And I'm like, okay.
Even better.
And I know he's the real deal.
Yeah, man.
And I think he's absolutely tickled that Liam Shaw became a Star Trek fan favorite, and he was so good in it.
100%. Well, that's what I told him, man. Because I'm like, and really from episode 1 of Picard season 3, when he said to Riker and Picard, no, I'm like, and all of us knowledgeable. I'm not claiming to be a brilliant man at all, but it's like any real fan of Star Trek knows that's exactly what Picard would have said if some other outside captain said, I need to go here and you and whatever. And it's like, no, sorry, this is my ship. You're not doing it.
You know what? And that's why people are like, oh, Rob, Star Trek Picard season 3 is more the same. I'm like, no, it's not. You're missing the point. And that's one of those reasons when he says no.
Yeah.
And there's so much in Picard season 3. Is it perfect? No, because they were saddled with Picard seasons 1 and 2 as well. But episode 4, when Riker is in his deep, dark depression and he sees this birth and he tells Deanna at the end, Star Trek Picard season 3, episode 4 is a great episode of Star Trek. And when I first saw it, Terry Matalas was showing it to me. And I didn't know Terry Matalas, and I'm ripping on him. We were ripping on each other, and he finally just said to me online, oh, I really like Free Enterprise. I'm like, oh, and then he made peace, and he's like, well, why don't you come take a look at this? I could have hated it. And when I got to episode 5, when Ro Laren comes back, and Ro and Picard are having a conversation in the holodeck, I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're dipping into Preemptive Strike, the penultimate episode of TNG, and this 30-year thing, and you're watching these two act. That I was totally, and the funny thing is I think that a lot of people look at the bigger picture, but they're not looking at the character stuff. Star Trek Picard season 3 is all about the characters. You
100%.
might not like that the Enterprise D flies through the Borg cube like the end of Return of the Jedi. That was by design. It was by design, and it was supposed to be rousing and fun. But what makes Star Trek Picard season 3 so great is that conversation with Ro Laren and Picard. That was 30 years in the making. That was incredible. That Riker, talking about the darkness that he saw when his son died. And then at the end of the episode, he says, I've watched a birth and I've realized why I'm out here. Those are the reasons why I loved Star Trek Picard. And that's why I loved it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. Absolutely. Boy, that triggered something. Preemptive Strike, such a great episode. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's a shame. Like, again, the entire audience, a lot of the audience, we like this. We want more of this. Well, guess what? Instead, you're getting Starfleet Academy. Okay.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you something. If someone said we're going to do a Starfleet Academy show and it's going to be like the paper chase of Star Trek, I would be like,
yes.
They don't even know what the fuck that is.
Of course they don't.
They don't know who John Houseman is. They don't know. They don't know that there was a movie.
Admiral Kingsfield. Absolutely not.
They don't know Kingsfield. They don't even know. And by the way, I would say that the TV series of The Paper Chase was better than the movie.
Massive fan, Rob. You see, Rob, this is what I'm saying, man. We grew up in totally different places, but we had the exact same taste and shared the same experiences.
I mean,
I
love The Paper Chase. Loved it.
The mom from Malcolm in the Middle is Jane Kaczmarek or whatever the hell her name was, is Hart's love interest in the Paper Chase in the first couple of seasons. Yeah, or the second and third seasons. I mean, that was the other great thing. It went from that one season on CBS, and then literally like 5 or 6 years later, Showtime keeps it going. Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, what a show! Oh, it was so great, and I'm so glad that both the lead that plays James Hart and John Houseman had the chance to go back to those characters and give us a real satisfying series. Yeah,
it was, and you know what? I don't think you're the only person. It's something I don't talk about. And Chaz here in your chat, Chaz knows The Paper Chase. The thing is, to me, The Paper Chase was appointment television. I was a little kid.
Oh, that's hilarious. I was when it was on in the 80s. I think I was in college.
Yeah, I was in the 80s. I was a little older, but I love. And the funny thing is, if someone said to me that Starfleet Academy, if they said that we're going to have our own Professor Kingsfield, I would have been like, I'll watch that show.
Sure.
Okay. You tell me that you're going to do that. I'm like, okay, that would make me interested in a Starfleet Academy series. No, it's going to be relationships and
it's going to be Gossip Girl, man. It's going to be Gossip Girl in space. It will. I'm sorry. I hope we're wrong. I hope we're proven wrong, and they finally get the right showrunner, like Terry was for season 3 of Picard, and we get a great experience. I hope so.
Yeah, dude, get Stellan Skarsgård to play Luthen from Andor, but do it as Professor Kingsfield. Starfleet Academy. Give me
I like
Luthen. I mean, I would watch that show, but that's not what they're going to be. I mean, the thing is, if you told me that a Starfleet Academy series was going to be Dead Poets Society meets The Paper Chase with a
Yeah.
little Goodwill Hunting thrown in for good measure, that's not what it's going to be. But if the showrunners said that's what we're going to do, I'd be like, fuck yeah, I am totally behind that. If it's a show that's not about the interpersonal relationships, which is going to have to be, but if it's a show about educators inspiring their students, to boldly go, I'm in.
I'm letting B Things know that Paper Chase is on YouTube, and they can find pretty much the entire series on YouTube.
By the way, Mike Jones says, and a bit of the right stuff too. Hell yeah. Hell
yeah. Yes, absolutely, man. Well, and again,
one of my top 10 favorite films of all time, by the way.
Me too, man. Well, Philip Kaufman, and that movie. And also when you find out that a lot of the special effects were done on a shoestring, there's
no opticals. It's all in camera.
Yep. It's amazing. No, I'm a massive and it's funny, you probably know.
Hey Ridley, you got any Beemans?
What's I might have a stick.
Well, loan me some. We'll pay you back later.
Fair enough. Yvonne Helm, man. Come on. Good Lord, yes.
There's a demon. There's a demon out there.
No, that entire movie.
Sound barrier.
And Fred Ward playing Gus Grissom.
Oh my God.
Heartbreaking, man.
Oh, he was the entire cast of that movie. And by the way, to show you how dumb corporate thinking is, Warner Brothers celebrates its 100th anniversary. They're remastering movies in 4K. Do they do the right stuff? No. Dolby Atmos remix? No. The people that work at Warner Brothers, they don't even know what that movie is. Don't even know. Made by the same company that made Blade Runner.
Well, like you've said, absolutely, man. These guys, it's commodities to them. And there's the only guys, and I don't even know if they still work at Warner Archive. Matt Ferranti and the other guys that used to do the podcast for Warner Archive. And
no, they're gone. I mean, and
they love. Go ahead.
Oh, well, no, we still have George Feltenstein, the guru of Warner Archive, who they got rid of. They got rid of the AT&T thing and they brought him back. George Feltenstein is the real deal. They should give him. As a matter of fact, they should just make George Feltenstein, as all the home video departments of all the studios go away.
Yeah.
They should make George Feltenstein the guy that works for all the studios. If Disney is giving their library to Sony, George Feltenstein should work for. He should be the repository of the entire history, Universal, Paramount, Sony, Disney, Lionsgate. They should all be. George Feltenstein should just be in charge of it all. He should be the guy that preserves all of our cinema history.
I'm with you. And again, I thank God for those YouTubers out there that upload things that aren't on video or have disappeared from video, and we can still enjoy them. No, it's fascinating to watch old television. And again, it's only when I can talk to a guy like you, Rob, that gets that and appreciates things like The Paper Chase. And I'm with you, man. I'm so with you. Too funny. I'm looking on the chat here. I agree, B Things. I watched The Right Stuff in a space cinema class. Interesting. I took in film school. It enriched my understanding of so many subsequent space-related movies. Sure. But also, you gotta go back to Destination Moon. You gotta go back to,
all of George Powell's stuff. War of the Worlds, When Worlds Collide, Conquest of Space. When I was a kid, those were my War of the Worlds. Byron Haskins, 1953 War of the Worlds. When I was 5 years old, was my favorite movie.
Sure.
I mean, and I've told this story before, probably on this show. I will never forget, and I'm going to say this because next month, again, when I was 5 years old, so I would watch anything that had monsters, science fiction, fantasy. I would watch anything that had that. I started watching Star Trek. So it was a Friday night. It was like my bedtime was like 9 o'clock. I'm like 5. I watched, TV.
Sure.
So I'm watching this movie starts, and there's a guy in a white astronaut suit. He's in a spaceship, and he pulls out a thing and he starts doing a log. And he's like, I leave the 20th century behind with no regrets. Does man still make war against his brother? And I'm watching this, and you hear this music, and then these credits start to happen. I'm like, oh, I missed it. But there's like colors, going, and it's clearly a spaceship going through space. I'm figuring, I'm gonna watch the credits because that's all. I'm not gonna see anything. Whatever. And I'm watching it, and then because I didn't know credits were really at the beginning of movies. They were at the end of movies, but this was the beginning of the movie. And then this spaceship crashes into the water. And I realized that this is the beginning of a movie. And I've seen the title. And I run upstairs. It's like 9:05, and I don't want to miss anything. And I run into my parents' bedroom, and they're sitting there. And I'm like, oh my God, there's this thing. It crashed. It goes, I have to watch it. Can I step? And my mom's like, calm down. Like, what's going on? And I'm trying to explain. These things, you got to go. And, I had seen it crash. I hadn't seen the dead crew member.
The one woman. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I tell
she was the Dr. Eve. Go on.
And I go, it's called Planet of the Apes. And and they could see that I'm possessed with insanity. And like my mom's like, well, if you fall asleep, we'll come wake you up. Okay, you can watch it. You can go downstairs because they're just happy to get me. Shut up.
And you were 5. You're 5 years old.
5 years old. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this. And Stuart's who died. And she dies in the thing. And I by the time I got back down, they're still climbing out of the Icarus. They're the raft is coming. Yeah. And they're going. I saw this going, gone, and you see the Icarus go into the water,
right?
And they traipse through the forbidden zone, and there's the weird lightning and stuff, and then they find water. They take off their clothes, and their clothes get stolen and stuff.
Yep.
So I'm watching this, and I'm like, oh well, there's no spaceship anymore, and it's just these dudes in like the desert, and but I kept watching because I'm like, what's going on? And then they find the glade with a bunch of like crow. I thought these are like cavemen eating food. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. And then this was the singular moment. Now I'd already seen War of the Worlds and all that, but this looked real. These are like people that I knew, like dudes that lived in today. They were astronauts, but they were like, It wasn't an old movie. It wasn't Technicolor. It was very verisimilitude, And I'm watching this, and something's going down, and all this. And then this might be the singular moment that turned me into an imagination connoisseur. Horseback, an ape wearing leather armor with a gun, and there's a snap zoom that goes whoosh into the ape, and you hear Jerry Goldsmith's music that goes wah, 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 wah. And my 5-year-old brain was shattered.
I hear you, buddy.
And I'm like, oh my God. And I there's one thing, kids love dinosaurs, but for me, talking apes on horseback with rifles and armor was better than Valley of the fucking Guanji. Let me tell you. And I was sitting there, and while I didn't quite, I'll say as a 5-year-old, I kept going. Like I would watch anything, and it was tough because I didn't understand what was happening. But the apes talking, and then of course, what does Charlton Heston do? He makes a fucking paper airplane, and I was so down with that. I'm like, oh, like a paper airplane makes these apes understand. I was so like, I got it as a 5-year-old kid. I got it, and my dad came down and checked on me a couple of times, and I knew he was there, but he just wanted to make sure I wasn't sleeping. And,
sure.
And my dad told me later, he's like, I don't think a child has ever been more focused on anything than you were when you saw Planet of the Apes when you were 5. And I was like, I remember the whole thing. And that was the time that was the first time. And I want to say this was 72, 73.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was it. I mean, it was the first time that I had my expectations subverted, and I saw something that was so beyond me, but so like I got it. I got that there was something going on in this movie that I didn't quite grasp, but I understood that a human guy, the black dude had his brain cut out.
Yeah,
and the woman died of. I understood. I even understood at 5 what suspended animation was. I got that. And then I understood, like, Charlton Heston couldn't talk. And as a 5-year-old, get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape. For me, that was like the greatest. As a kid, I'm like, I couldn't say fuck yeah, but I understood what that meant. And as a kid, I'm like, oh my God. Like, it was the most mind-blowing shit I'd ever seen in my life.
I'm with you, son.
And then I think I just dabbled in Twilight Zone. I don't know. I don't think I'd seen my first Twilight Zone episode was To Serve Man. Same kind of thing. Blew my mind.
It's a cookbook.
But yeah, but my dad was in the room because he'd seen the movie. So he comes downstairs and I was still like watching this movie. He didn't interrupt me or anything, but he wanted to see what I thought at the end of the movie. My dad was in the room, like watching the red wedding in Game of Thrones for the people that knew. So my dad comes down, so funny, and I'm like sitting there. I'm sitting there watching this, and never forget this. I didn't know my dad was standing behind me. I didn't know he was there. And it's weird because there's a weird on TV too. It's even weirder. There's a camera pullout. When you see that, so there's the camera's up above and it's looking down as they walk, and you see the spires of the Statue of Liberty. You don't know what it is. The way they set up, and I'm watching this, and God damn, and he's pounding on the ground, and I'm like, what? And then when you see the Statue of Liberty, my 5-year-old self I finally put it all together. And I like the way my dad told it. I leaped out of. I was sitting in the Barca lounger, the love seat or whatever, and I leaped out of the chair, and I went up to the TV, and I'm like, my hands. We had one of those big TVs that had a LP thing in it too.
Sure.
Had a record player. And I like my hands. I can't even reach both sides of the TV, and I have my face pressed against the TV. And I'm like, no, I'm screaming, and my dad just starts laughing, and that's what I'm spitting at. But that's when I found out he's behind me, and he starts laughing, and I'm like, I've just had this the most traumatic experience any kid has ever had in his life.
Yeah,
and my dad is laughing at me, and I just didn't understand what was happening, and I'm like, oh my God, and my dad's laughing, and I'm like, they're on Earth. That was when an imagination connoisseur was forged. At that Friday night, can't tell you what day it was. I know I was 5. That was it. And on May 10th, a mere 35 days away, another Planet of the Apes movie is coming out.
Oh, that's right, the new one.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see that in the theater. You're right.
And I as a 5-year-old kid, I mean, I don't know if kids can have these kinds of experiences now because they already live in a world where Jurassic Park and Star Wars exist.
Yeah.
These things didn't. They didn't exist, so they couldn't fill your imagination.
Well, I had that same book, that softcover book, Sci-Fi Fanatics or whatever it was. That
Sci-Fi Now by Alan Frank?
Yeah, Sci-Fi Now. And I was just like you, man. I'm like, I got to see these movies. And I didn't see all of them the way you did.
Except one.
Which one again?
The Bed Sitting Room. Directed by Richard Lester. I own the Blu-ray.
Yes.
And
yes, I remember you saying this.
I own it. I own this movie. It's still in the cellophane. I can't watch it. I think I've seen every movie, and if I watch if I am dying of cancer, and I'm on my deathbed, I'm going to watch The Bed Sitting Room. Is going to be the last movie I ever watch in my life.
All right, I respect that. That's cool. But like you, I had that book. I would watch things. I didn't get to see Twilight Zone until college because it wasn't running in Chicago for whatever reason. And I had to go downstate to Illinois State to actually watch the Twilight Zone. And I was thrilled. But for Planet of the Apes, there was a movie distribution company in my hometown, Wilmette, Illinois, suburb of Chicago. And one of our neighbors worked there. And she could bring 16 millimeter prints of various films to home, and she would invite neighborhood people over. So with that couple and their son, my stepmother, my father, and I went, and we watched Planet of the Apes around the same time as you, 72, 73.
Yeah.
It was before it was on the CBS late movies, which I know made a meal of all the 5 ape movies. And then also we would have the 3:30 movie where we'd have Ape Week, and they would show
the Go Ape. I mean, here's what I don't understand. So 20th Century Fox is acquired by Disney.
Yes.
There is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is the 10th Planet of the Apes.
Yes. Yes.
There's a TV series, a live action series. There's an animated show.
A very smart adult animated show.
Yeah. So
not talk down to you.
Why is there not a Go Ape button on Disney Plus? I grew up, I mean, the first franchise, there was only 2. There was James Bond and Planet of the Apes. Those are the things I lived for. Right. I had the Power Records.
Yes.
I had everything. And I, we'd have Go Ape Week in the theater. They would re-release films.
Yes, at the drive-ins and everything. Absolutely, man.
Disney has owned Fox for 5 years. If Fox taught us nothing, they would, on DVD, they gave us a Caesar head sculpt with the DVDs in the back. They gave us a beautiful pull-out, slip-cased version with a book of all 5 Planet of the Apes movies. Where are the 4Ks of Planet of the Apes, Beneath Planet of the Apes, Escape from Planet of the Apes, Conquest of Planet of the Apes? Fox knew when they were autonomous that the Planet of the Apes movies were a perennial. How is it that Disney has never remastered the original Planet? They have $150 million, maybe $130 million Planet of the Apes movie coming out. The 10th Planet of the Apes film. And there's no Go Ape button on Disney Plus. They don't. I mean, it is unconscionable to me. They wonder why their stock price, well, actually their stock price has been going up lately, but they wonder, how are you putting out, because Fox would always tie in, home video would always tie in, if you have a theatrical release, you release the other. How is it that they are not touting the Planet of the Apes franchise as being, is it because it's 20th Century Studios that they bought? It's coming out May 10th. Today, the first Omen comes out, and apparently it's pretty good. Bob Murawski, who is Sam Raimi's editor, cut it, and it was sent back to the ratings board a number of times because it was getting an X because it was so extreme. How is it that Disney is not promoting these things? There's been barely any promotion that the first Omen, again, a Fox property, everyone in the 70s saw the Omen, and Damien Omen 2, and The Final Conflict, Omen 3, has one of my favorite deaths in any movie, when a head of state takes a typewriter ribbon and ties it to his door and calls a press conference, and people come into his office, and he's sitting there. When they open the door, it pulls the trigger of the gun and blows his head off.
That's
unbelievable.
Right. Yeah.
Why is it that you have the first? So 20th Century Studios has the first Omen coming out, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Alien Romulus in August. And Deadpool and Wolverine, while now, yes, it's MCU, it really is Fox.
Sure it is.
Wolverine started in 2000, 24 years ago. Deadpool later than that, but it's basically the end of the Fox era being moved into the Disney era.
Totally.
So it's 4 20th Century Studios movies, and where's the hype?
That's a good question. I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. No, it's amazing. And yet, Lucas merchandising started with Planet of the Apes, and that's where Lucas learned the lesson of Hey, if you don't mind, I'd like a percentage of the merchandise. Okay.
Mego.
What does that mean?
The Mego
Yes.
Planet of the Apes line was the first great. I mean, they made the world's greatest superheroes,
Sure
but
they did.
those were comic characters, but
Right.
the Planet of the Apes toy line might have been the first great movie-related toy line ever.
Yeah. They had trading cards. I mean, yeah. No, posters, obviously. No, it was huge. And again, like you said, in the 70s when we grew up and everything, beyond the release of the movies, they would just be staples at the drive-ins on the weekends and staples on the 3:30 movie. I remember those great Roddy McDowell in the 80s got in the makeup and made wraparounds, interstitials for the TV presentation of the movies, and even gave for the because they cut up, as you well know, the ape television show episodes into like two episodes
movies.
of the movies.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like we never got a definitive ending to the TV series, but in those interstitials, Roddy McDowell says they did make it back to Earth, which is hilarious to hear. But James Naughton and Ron Hunter, that
Yep.
you know, the astronauts from the TV
They're great.
show, yeah,
Which they made the action figures of.
yep.
And
You know,
but here's the thing. Why? So here's a franchise that has basically been forgotten. The Planet of the Apes franchise loomed large in my childhood.
yes,
When you're a kid, when you're watching the Planet of the Apes movies, you're not thinking, oh, those movies are old. I mean, the first Planet of the Apes film is one of the great science fiction movies of all time.
1968. Yep,
I mean, it's, that in 2001,
same year.
the
Yep.
1-2 punch of those films, those are right there. I mean, everyone says, okay, it's Blade Runner or whatever, but you have to remember at the time, those were the two best science fiction movies ever made. Star Wars hadn't come out yet. People could say, Forbidden Planet was up there, Day of the Earth Stood Still, but no. 2001, by the way, 2001 still number one. But
Sure.
Planet of the Apes was number 2. Maybe Forbidden Planet was 3. Day of the Earth Stood Still was 4, and War of the Worlds was 5. Metropolis might have been 6 if you like silent films, whatever. But you could count the great science fiction movies on 2 hands.
100%. 100%. I got to ask you, Rob, regarding 2001, but a different movie, James Mangold's Ad Astra. Wasn't it Mangold that made Ad Astra?
No, that was James Gray.
Thank you. Okay. I always felt, and listen, I loved Ad Astra, and Brian Bendis makes fun of me. He's like, it's so boring. I'm like, I thought it was intense. But more importantly, I think Ad Astra is the mirror opposite of 2001 because all the wonder that's in 2001, the space station and them on the moon and all of that, it becomes incredibly ordinary for Brad Pitt's experience.
Right.
And that great scene when he's on the moon and it looks like an airport and he's walking through and he passes a DHL and a subway.
Yep.
And it's like, because now space travel has become so normalized, it isn't the big deal that it was. And I love that about the movie, that it really, because eventually it is going to be ordinary, just like stepping on an airplane and traveling to the other side of the world. It's a glorified bus now. It's a glorified Greyhound bus these days.
Yeah.
Which sucks because I was a little kid getting in my best suit, flying first class with my parents.
Oh yeah.
Trip to Disneyland and stuff like that. So yeah, man. But I do. I do you like Ad Astra?
I don't love it. I think because the ending, I think it's anticlimactic, but I did like a lot of it. I mean, to me, I love For All Mankind.
So do I, Rob. We haven't talked about it, but
yeah,
it's truly an amazing show. And every season they outdo themselves. It's truly amazing.
No, it's but Ad Astra, look, I'll watch if something takes place in space, I will watch it. I think the Kickstarter campaign for the Expanse action figures ends today. I think that anything that takes place in space, or I'll watch. Ad Astra I put in the same genre as movies like Moon.
Sure.
I think my favorite. I think my favorite space movie of recent is Ridley Scott's The Martian, the extended version.
Love it.
But I have to tell you, did you read? So Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, his third book, Project Hail Mary. Have you read it?
No, I'm not. Shame on me, Rob. And I do read novels. And I read.
Don't read it.
Oh,
Don't read
okay.
it.
Okay.
It is the most wildly entertaining book I've read in years. But they're making the movie, and it starts shooting in June.
Okay.
If you can hold off, Ryan Gosling's playing the lead. It is, if they pull it off, and when I say it's going to be the modern E.T., the tone is not E.T., but it is a first contact tale. That book, if they pull it off, could be one for the ages.
Wow.
Because imagine E.T., the Martian, and the emotion of the Shawshank Redemption in one movie.
A kind of Better Enemy Mine, if you will.
No, because I let's just say it's about, there is a problem that both Earth and a very different civilization have, that both civilizations are trying to solve, and in doing so, these civilizations both meet.
Okay.
And they're the alien civilization is different than any alien you've ever seen.
Okay.
Truly alien.
Okay.
And so, but imagine dude Ryan Gosling, who's like, yo, he's the everyman.
Sure.
But he's also a brilliant scientist. And they have to figure out, one, how to communicate. Because we come from things, this creature is very different than a human being. And they have to figure out, because they're both from spacefaring scientific civilizations.
Okay.
So science is their common language.
Okay.
So how and they have to figure out how can they communicate, and how can they solve their problem. I read this book. I heard this book was good. It's called Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I get it, from Amazon. I'm sitting in our kitchen. We have a little, like, an island in our kitchen, and I'm sitting on one of the bar stools where I always sit, have my morning coffee. I'm sitting there and I have this book and I start reading it. And Elizabeth comes by, and an hour later she comes by, I haven't moved. Another hour she comes by, I haven't moved. A third hour goes by and I'm 3/4 of the way through this book. And I can't turn the pages fast enough. And she goes, can I make you something? Do you need? I'm like, no, I'm fine. I sat there and I read this entire book in one sitting, literally on a stool at our kitchen counter. The dogs are coming up. They're like, I was so locked in. It was kind of like when Eduardo Saverin comes to the Facebook headquarters in the social network. And you have what's his face, boy band guy, Sean Parker says to Eduardo Saverin, "Oh no, Zuckerberg's he's wired in," and Saverin comes and smashes the computer. I was wired in. You could not. There was nothing that mattered to me than turning the pages of this book, and I literally read it in one sitting at the kitchen. It was so good. This book was so good. When it was over, I was elated. Like, I felt it was like having whatever, having sex with Farrah Fawcett Majors and Logan's Run. It was that good. I'm like, oh my God, it was so amazing. Cool. And this book is it was so good. And Lord and Miller, who made Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, and they did 21 Jump Street. If you know they're directing the movie, Ryan Gosling's in it. I can't imagine a better creative team to do this particular film. Now, it's special effects heavy because the alien creature is going to be very effects intensive, and it has to be ET quality engagement in terms of the audience. Sure. It's going to be one of the great science fiction films of all time. but it's also a rousing, crowd-pleasing entertainment. It is, I think. So if someone were to say, if you're going to bet all the money on what movies come out in the future that you think is going to be the biggest movie ever, it would be Project Hail Mary, directed by Lord Miller, starring Ryan Gosling. If you haven't read the book, I mean, the book is so good, but if you haven't read the book, don't read the book. If you want to see the movie, whatever. It's so good. If they fuck it up, and they could, I don't think they will, but if they do, that'll suck.
Is there a trailer out yet or no?
No, they haven't. They start shooting in June.
Oh, excuse me. Okay.
Yeah, they haven't started.
I was going to ask, because I always love yours and Campia's reports from, and I forget what it's called now, if it's
CinemaCon, which is next week. I'm not going.
Oh, wow. You're not going this year? Okay.
No, I couldn't afford to go. And
totally get it.
Yeah.
I haven't been.
The pass is $1,200.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yeah.
Well, I mean, really.
So you have to understand CinemaCon. So what CinemaCon is? It's not like Comic-Con.
Right.
CinemaCon used to be called Show West, like in the 80s and 90s. It is so it's in Vegas. It's for all the theater owners.
Yes.
So it's a convention for theater owners.
Yes, industry
and the studio. It's totally industry. It's not for the public. And all the theater owners come to see what movies are coming out for the next year. So all the studios show. And like George Miller, who directed the Mad Max movies, is getting an award, so they're going to show Furiosa there.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That's
so,
great.
and we saw Top Gun Maverick months before it opened.
Well, I remember you talking up Ford versus Ferrari, and I'm like, great. And and also it was really fascinating as we were coming out of COVID, and the celebrities that would show up and promote their own movies, and essentially, please, let's get back to business. And it's been a struggle, obviously, and people got too comfortable. I think we've talked about this before, that COVID exacerbated what was already happening because of cable, and just the price of tickets and everything else. And it's like, God, Rob, I don't belong to a movie club because there aren't enough theater releases to justify being in a movie club. And when I got to dump just for the ticket $20 here in Chicago to see a movie, it's like, I'm sorry, you're not really inducing me to want to go to the theater. And I love the theater experience.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Dune 2, you have to see in a theater, in a big theater. It was amazing, and I'm hoping that we're going to get more of that. I mean, I think Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is going to be great. I do think that Deadpool and Wolverine is going to be great. I do think
that. Yep.
Alien Romulus. I mean, we're getting a lot of really by the way, I can't wait to see Joker 2 Folly Do.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I am too.
It's going to be insanity.
Yeah.
And people I don't like musicals. I'm like, okay, I don't know what, people are like, I want to see The Killing Joke. I get it. I do. But we're not going to I think it's going to be crazy. The fact that the first Joker movie, a $65 million movie, made $1 billion. I think what we're going to get with Lady Gaga, that poster that came out, all the world's a stage or whatever. And I'm like, Phoenix, Gaga, I'm in. I'm like,
I get it. No, I get it. It's funny. You said before that Metalis with Picard approached you and said, hey, by the way, I really like Free Enterprise. I had the same experience with Patrick Schumacher, I believe, the showrunner for the Harley Quinn animated show. And, we did that BBC show Powerless.
Yeah.
He heard Bendis and I ripping Powerless, and he emailed me, and he's like, hey, man, listen, there's a real story behind what we had to deal with that network and Powerless. And he goes, and by the way, I'm a huge Word Balloon fan. And I'm like, oh, Patrick, I feel terrible. So I had him on, and this is like a year or two before they even announced Harley Quinn was coming up.
Yeah.
And he told me on the sly, he's like, DC's taking care of me. I can't go into detail, but I got a big project coming up. So when the animated series happened, I'm like, oh, that's great. And I'm so happy for him. And especially, he's one of the co-producers of Abbott Elementary as well.
Right. Yep. Which is an amazing show.
Yeah. And truly, because he's such a good guy, like Metalis has proven to be, as he's been interviewed by various people and stuff.
Yeah.
and I'd love to. I don't know if you're able to put in a word. I'd love to talk to Terry sometime too.
Oh, I'm
but,
sure you do it.
Well, there you go. But anyway, yeah. So I know that feeling of, oh shit, I'm sorry, man. I'm shitting on your product, and it's like the good news is, again, he's so redeemed what happened with Powerless with Harley Quinn and Abbott Elementary. So yeah, he's a sweetheart, and I'm just like, oh, Patrick, I'm so happy for you, man.
Oh yeah.
So, it worked out. It worked out well for him. But yeah,
Well, listen, I must go.
Yeah. Oh, let's. Yeah. I know. I'm so sorry, Robert. Again, we're gonna.
No, it's all good. I just have to get up for Campia.
No, yeah, believe me, I understand. So yeah, this is terrific. I really appreciate it. Everybody, quick reminder that the Kickstarter for True Noir is coming.
Yep.
And you got great creatives behind this. Stashwick is playing Nathan Heller, and it's Max Collins and Rob Meyer Burnett. I'm very excited for you guys, and I think it's going to be great. So yes, I mean, whatever I can do to help the Kickstarter. Once
I
it's
appreciate
up,
that. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, bud. And truly, thank you for the. I'm glad we're able to get together every year or two.
Well,
and,
we have the best time. This is so much fun. Thank you for letting me. My father, when I was in Indian Guides, called me Chief Running Mouth, and I want to thank you for allowing me to continue to do that. Live up to that name.
That's always a good time, man. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. More Great Word Balloon Live next week. I hope you'll join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.